says it's busy.
In compliance with Chapter
don't miss a
551,
treat.
Open Meetings of the Texas Government Code is amended. I call to order a meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District I call to order a meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District for Monday, June 17, 2019 at 6:01 p.m. The board may meet in closed session to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee, purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, a negotiated contract for a prospective gift or donation to the district, commercial or financial information that the board has received from a business prospect, or offer of financial or other incentive to a business prospect, deployment or specific occasions for implementation of security, personnel, or devices, and or to consult with legal counsel regarding pending or contemplated litigation or a settlement offer, or on a matter which the school district's legal counsel determines should be confidential, including discussion of certain legislation and its legal effects on district contracting, taxation, and curriculum options in accordance with Chapters 551 of the Texas Government Code, Sections 551.074, 072, 073, 087, 076, and 071 respectively. We will move to the approval of the agenda. Secretary Ellens, do you have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Having a motion by Secretary, is there a second?
Second.
Having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Teish to approve the agenda, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion passes unanimously by all those on the dais. Secretary Ellens, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and pledge the Texas flag?
We do, happily.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. We will now recess the open meeting and move to executive session in the board office. Do I have a motion to adjourn the open meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Who moved?
Dan.
Ann. Having a motion by Trustee Teish and a second by Trustee Cindy Anderson to adjourn the open meeting, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion passes unanimously by all those on the dais. We will now recess the open meeting at 6:03 p.m. and move to executive session in the board office. Thank you. Good evening. We will now reconvene the open meeting at 7:20 p.m. And tonight we have two recognitions. We'll begin our evening by recognizing Ben Hoffer. Dr. Cruz.
I was ready with the Pledge of Allegiance. We're doing a little bit different right now, right? No, but let me
We already did
let me ask Michelle Wallace to do our first introduction.
Good evening, Dr. Cruz, President Rodriguez, trustees. I am here tonight to ask for formal recognition of two groups for their support of and commitment to Austin ISD students. First, we have Ben Hoffer. Ben, would you join me and your family? Ben and his mother, Kelly Walton, and his brother, Nate Hoffer, are here with us tonight. It is my pleasure to request formal recognition from the trustees for Ben Hoffer.
Thank you, Michelle. Trustee Matthias, is there a motion to recognize Ben Hoffer?
There is, but before I read this, I'd like to say there are many ways to do good in this world, and what you've chosen to do in helping these students is really, really remarkable, tremendous. What an honor it is for us as a board to be able to recognize you and your family and all who helped to do what you coordinated. And so on behalf of the Austin ISD Board of Trustees, it is our great pleasure to recognize Ben Hoffer for his support in eliminating school lunch debt at Austin ISD and his commitment to helping address hunger issues in Austin. On April 21st, 2019, Ben Hoffer, a 14-year-old student at St. Andrew's Episcopal School, created a GoFundMe account to help pay off the negative meal account balances for students at 3 AISD schools: Aikens High School, Paredes Middle School, and Blazier Elementary. Mr. Hoffer quickly reached his initial goal of $3,200 to pay off the debts at these 3 schools, and has since raised his fundraising goal 2 more times. The GoFundMe campaign, titled Lunch Counts, No Child Should Be Hungry at School, has surpassed his most recent goal of $10,000 and received national attention. Mr. Hoffer's generosity is to be commended. It is with great pride that the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District recognizes and thanks Mr. Hoffer for his support of Austin ISD students. So moved.
Second.
So having a motion by trustee Matthias and a second by trustee Teish to approve the recognition, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion passes unanimously by all those on the dais. Please come forward. Yeah. If you'd come forward to meet the trustees and take a picture with you.
I think we're doing the photo now. Sure you want? Yeah, come on up. Are you kidding? We know how this works. Okay.
We'll get in the background.
One, take 2 of them. 1, 2. Cindy, can you this way? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you to Ben and his family for supporting that project. I would be remiss, and Annalise Tanner would get very upset with me if I didn't remind everyone that any community member can support these campaigns, either through Ben's GoFundMe campaign or, is it? I think, or through our campaign on Giving Tree, and we're also grateful to organizations like A+ FCU and Fly Right Chicken, who have given significant contributions to eliminate student lunch debt. Next, we are very excited to recognize our partnership with Integral Care. As you know, Integral Care provides incredible and valuable mental health services and supports for our community and for AISD students. Here with us tonight, if you join me, Ellen Richards, Chief Strategy Officer, Hugh Simmons, Director of Child and Family Services, and Keisha Martinez, Program Manager. Trustees, it's my pleasure to request formal recognition for Integral Care.
Thank you. Trustee Cindy Anderson, is there a motion to recognize Integral Care?
Yes, thank you for asking. On behalf of the Austin ISD Board of Trustees, it is my honor to recognize Integral Care for their leadership, continued support, and commitment to Austin ISD students. Through an agreement with Austin ISD, Integral Care has provided full-time, on-campus behavioral health services for school-aged children and adolescents at 16 schools in the Austin Independent School District since December of 2014. Integral Care specializes in working with youth and adults who experience acute behavioral, psychiatric, and emotional challenges. The majority of youth served in this program come from families experiencing significant economic hardships. Research shows that youth with mental illness or emotional or behavioral disturbance typically experience pronounced academic and behavioral deficits as compared to other youth without these issues. One important 2004 study found that students with an emotional and behavioral disturbance showed large academic deficits across all content areas. Timely mental health treatment can significantly ameliorate and even eliminate the academic and behavioral performance gaps that are typically experienced by students with a mental illness or emotional or behavioral disturbance. In 2017-18, Integral Care school mental health services significantly reduced and many times eliminated performance gaps for youth in treatment with Integral Care. Students demonstrated improvement in areas including behavior, attendance, academic performance, and engagement with the justice system. The services provided have demonstrated the broad positive impact Integral Care services have on student and family experience related to mental health services in Austin ISD. This type of partnership is to be commended. It is with great pride that the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District recognizes and thanks Integral Care. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Having a motion by trustee Cindy Anderson and a second by trustee Teish to approve the recognition. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion passes unanimously by all those on the dais. Please come forward so we can thank you and take a picture with you.
See, Ellen, can you go a little this way? Thank you. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
The board will now move to public comment. This is the time we dedicate ourselves to welcoming and encouraging public comments during our regular board meeting and to commit ourselves to active listening. Board members wish they could engage in a conversation with speakers on matters of concern and interest to the speaker that is not part of tonight's agenda, but in accordance with Section 551.042A of the Texas Government Code Legal, board members may only make a statement of specific factual information or recite existing policy in response to an inquiry, propose that the subject be placed on a future agenda, or ask that the speaker visit with staff about the issue. After the completion of public comment, trustees may request from the superintendent additional information, clarification, and/or follow-up based upon comments provided by any one or more speakers. Please also know that there are additional ways to communicate with the board, including emailing the board directly at trustees@austinisd.org. In order to provide as many opportunities for input as possible within a limited time period at this meeting, each speaker will be allotted 2 minutes with a maximum of 30 speakers allowed. Speakers may sign up by phone or in person. No substitutions or yielding of time to others is permitted. And as you come to the microphone tonight, there's a device that will light up as you move through your 2 minutes of allotted time. When the buzzer sounds, please make a final thought in one sentence. We ask that whether you come to give a complaint or praise, that you reference the staff member by position or by abbreviated last name. We ask that all audience members, whether speaking or not, please show respect for others at all times. Should you wish to offer additional written remarks that are not bound by time, please give them to the AISD officer on duty. Each board member and the superintendent will be provided with a copy. The Office of Translation and Interpretation provides a Spanish language translator for audience members who need assistance when addressing trustees or need assistance understanding comments made to trustees during public comment. If you need this service during other portions of the meeting, please speak with the interpreter. Jennifer Williams, Spanish translator and interpreter, will repeat this message in Spanish.
La Oficina de Interpretación y Traducción proporciona un intérprete al español para las personas de la audiencia que necesitan ayuda al comunicarse con los miembros de la mesa directiva o si necesitan ayuda para entender los comentarios que se están haciendo a los miembros de la mesa directiva durante el tiempo dedicado para los comentarios públicos. Si necesita este servicio, por favor, hable conmigo, intérprete Jennifer Williams, servidora.
Gracias. Gracias, Jennifer. The first speaker tonight will be Angie Phillips, followed by Robert Kibbe, Suzanne Kearns, and then Megan Dougherty.
Good evening. I'm here to address the impending sex ed curriculum, since through this process, I've come to realize that my thoughts as a parent are not welcome in AISD. Why? The survey sent to parents in the fall didn't include a checkbox for do not think appropriate. The survey results presented to you by the SHAC didn't include when a parent believed a topic only appropriate at a higher grade level. No one will disclose the author of the elementary curriculum. The chosen middle school curriculum was not released for viewing until the last week of school. In the allotted time, I was only able to view 3 of the 7th grade lessons before they were picked up, and definitely unable to take a survey on every individual lesson. Nor did it allow for commenting when you chose I'd opt out. Why is this being shoved through without real parent involvement? How are you or AISD able to consider the social and emotional needs of an entire district? At every level, we have remedial to advanced reading and math classes because we know if a child is not developmentally ready, that the class would confuse them, stress them out, and be harmful socially to them and vice versa. However, with the SHAC's adopted standards, we are saying every child should be in advanced sex ed, whether they are cognitively, emotionally, or physically ready or not. Thus, we expose the children that are innocent and tell the children that have been exposed too young that as long as it feels okay, to go with it. Yes, anal and oral sex are in fact taught as a healthy relational activity for 12-year-olds as long as they consent and protect in the Get Real curriculum. I am not anti-sex ed. What I am against is curriculum that is highly editorialized, opinionated, and controversial, chosen by a committee that is not diverse of thought. It is my right and role as a parent to thank you. Oh, should I finish? Sorry. To instill these as my own personal thing. This is why we're leaving AISD. We don't trust you anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert Kibbe.
Good afternoon, trustees. I'm back. How many of y'all missed me? Don't answer it. No, please don't answer. I'm here June 3rd. I watched the board meeting. Pretty disturbed at some of the things that I heard. Those kids. Bullies. You also heard mobs mentioned. We already had one former trustee that called us ignorant activists, and that's why I'm wearing my shirt now. And to be called mobs because we go and we preach and we talk to you guys what we believe, it's outrageous. You know, we're doing these school changes. Back in 1987, I got bused. Supposed to go to Travis. I went to Johnston. Long way away. Now we're talking about busing our kids again. I hope you guys do not give in to political pressure. and have people from the other side of the highway feel what we felt like since day one, always being discriminated against. Bring them to our side. Let them come with these kids, and I'm proud to be one of these kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Suzanne Kearns.
Good evening. My name is Suzanne Kearns. I'm a parent of 2 AISD students and also here speaking on behalf of the Informed Parents of Austin. I want to say thank you again for your unanimous vote in February in favor of comprehensive inclusive sex ed. I said it then and I believe it now more than ever. Your support of sex ed will improve and even save students' lives. The Trevor Project just released a report showing that of LGBTQ people aged 13 to 24, nearly 1 in 5 tried to kill themselves by suicide, and 39% had seriously considered suicide in the past year. There are over 80,000 students in AISD. Statistically, hundreds of them are LGBTQ students who will try to kill themselves by suicide this year, and thousands more will consider it. A year ago, the SHAC voted to approve the district reviews team's sex ed recommendations for this past school year. That vote was nullified, and the rollout of the new curriculum was pushed back to a coming year. A year is a long time for kids who are considering killing themselves to wait. Last November, there were 3 public information sessions and a district-wide survey to collect feedback from over 5,000 respondents. The survey results were overwhelmingly in favor of comprehensive sex ed that is inclusive of LGBTQ students. Since February, the review team has been evaluating all of the lessons available for purchase or materials needed to create their own lessons. And after months of painstaking work, last month they put forth their recommendations and made them publicly available. We now have had a year of input from parents, combined with over 2 years of review by district staff. I know there are opponents of sex ed who will love to stall indefinitely by continually asking for more time for parent input, second-guessing choices made by the district, or distributing snippets of lesson plan material out of context to spread misinformation and fear. As a parent, I appreciate you give weight to our feedback, but I also agree that we should let professionals who are trained in evaluating curricula, let them do their job. Please consider this when you vote on the sex ed lessons in August. Literally, lives are at stake. Thank you.
Thank you. Megan Dougherty, and then Jack Schwartz, and then Vanessa McDougall. Okay, Megan, how about Jack Schwartz?
Hello. My name is Jack Houston Schwartz. I'm an activist as well as an incoming senior at Austin High. Since my childhood, I've been moved by the teachings of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as well as Malcolm X. So when I moved to Austin from Houston last summer, I jumped at the opportunity to take the African American History course offered only at Austin High, and I would like to speak about this course's importance not only to the black student body, but also to the student body across the district. Names such as Diane Nash, Denmark Vesey, and Bobby Seale are all names often pushed aside when discussing our nation's history, and it had not been for this course, I too would not know the importance of these black leaders, nor would I know the importance of Austin's role during the Civil Rights Movement. This class and my teacher have pushed me to become an avid reader, a better writer, and above all, an educated citizen. I would like to see this class be implemented district-wide and continue to educate and prosper at Austin High, for Black history is American history. Thank you.
Vanessa.
Hello. Thank you for this opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Vanessa McDougall. I am a parent of 2 AISD students, and I have also taught a comprehensive, inclusive sex ed curriculum for junior high students at my church for the last 5 years. It's called Our Whole Lives, if you want to learn more about it. And through that experience, I've seen the need for more inclusive and comprehensive sex ed for Austin students. Even though our kids were on average more knowledgeable than average, I had a girl who menstruated for 6 months straight and didn't realize that's not normal. I had a boy who thought he could get pregnant if he wanted to. I had students every year who thought you could get pregnant through oral sex. So I was very excited to see AISD's decision to implement a more comprehensive and inclusive curriculum, and so that more students can understand how their bodies work than we could ever educate in our little church program. I've seen the actual lessons and I was really excited about them. And when I went to the meeting to see the lessons, I was disappointed to see a small minority trying to hijack the process and spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So tonight I'm here to ask you to stand with the 94% of AISD parents who filled out the survey indicating this was a change they wanted in the curriculum. And when you vote in August, please vote to support the new curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Rebecca Harshman, and then Ramon Maldonado, and then Naomi Wilson, and then Emily Sawyer.
Good evening, esteemed trustees and superintendent. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Last week in New York, 62 school diversity recommendations reflecting the 6 R's of real integration were approved by Mayor Bill de Blasio. There, values of equity through diversity are being enacted as policy, while in AISD, we can barely elevate socioeconomic diversity to a sub-bullet point. Now, the think tanks are asking us to think of creative solutions to the problems that exist in our system. A possibility is to open boundaryless academies across the district, focusing on civil leadership and social justice. These would not have applications, but would use lottery admissions to balance student diversity on campus. The academies would teach students how to collaborate with peers from different backgrounds. In my experience at school, students have a lot to learn in terms of cultural understanding, and it's not their fault. Our schools are so separated. Sure, we have lessons about microaggressions, but they don't make up for the lack of understanding when privileged kids are raised in privileged bubbles. A civic leadership academy can teach kids the power of cultural understanding, a power that is needed in the 21st century more than any learning space or test score. There are schools like this in San Antonio, Dallas, Denver, and Charlotte. New York just agreed to apply these principles to their district of 1.1 million students. When will we take our first step?
Thank you. Mr. Maldonado.
Good evening, board. Yet I come again, and I'm giving you 10 points that I gave you 3 months ago, questions that I haven't received questions on. I want it in writing this time. We had a good meeting with Dr. Cruz, and we reached out to some staff, and evidently some staff don't know what went on. But anyway, we're continuing to aggressively go and recruit children, but then we also have another competition. So what I'm saying is, it's an elementary school, and there's 2 communities there that really need that school there. Yes, you're painting a big picture, and the data is very grim for our school. But if those children, especially in those ages from 1 to 7, whatever, 5th grade, need special attention from their parents to come to the school, to walk to the school. If you uproot them and send them somewhere else, how are these parents are supposed to get there? I don't know if they can go, how far they're going to be. I don't know if they're going to be at Capital Metro. I don't know how they're going to get transported out there. But I just want a fair shake for our students, especially. That's when the learning from 1st grade to 5th grade, that's when kids are like a sponge. And if you've got great teachers, they'll learn something. We want some time. We want hopefully to open your eyes and see if you can help us and give us time to see if we can increase our enrollment. See if you can help us. You can help us increase our enrollment. And these views are my views personally. It doesn't reflect my team. We got a good team working. But I just don't want to know if we're wasting our time. That's all. I mean, the way I hear you guys talk sometimes paint a big, grim picture. You know that the schools are. I'm done. But thank you very much for your time and great job y'all doing. But thanks again.
Thank you. Naomi Wilson, then Emily Sawyer, and then Joy Butler.
Five transgender women were murdered this month. Most of them were under the age of 35. I'm 23. Whenever I see their age, I feel scared. I'm 23. Malaysia Booker was also 23. They're killing the next generation. And the reason why is because they're allowing minorities, like Texas Values, are proud of their discrimination. They're teaching that being LG, or T is equal to being a pedophile, someone who commits sexual immorality, and that's wrong. Celebration Church is another organization that believes those things. I don't think that you guys should give the platform to groups that say that my existence is comparable to a crime. I have done no wrong in my life. I have lived 23 years as myself, and I hope that you guys recognize that every dime that comes from Celebration Church has blood on it. It does. Spend it on something that will increase inclusivity. That's all I want.
Thank you. Emily Sawyer.
Good evening, Superintendent Cruz and Board of Trustees. My name is Emily Sawyer. My children attend Blanton Elementary and Martin Middle Schools. I'm happy to be able to begin by saying thank you for raising salaries for teachers and direct service staff. As Trustee Mathias stated at the June 3 work session, a budget is a moral document, and a commitment like this is one indication that this district values the people who are doing the work on the ground, day in and day out, in and around our schools. Thank you. In Austin ISD, we find ourselves at a moment of great uncertainty, but also great opportunity. Not only do we have opportunities to be innovative with our learning environments and programming, we can choose to be innovative with our own mindsets and conceptions of what is possible, to name and value difference where once we only saw threat and deficit, to admit that we have often chosen to protect and compound our own privilege, and instead allow ourselves to be challenged and changed, to see what seems like sacrifice and realize it is actually an opportunity to discover value where we never would have looked for it before. Simultaneously, we can and must work systemically. The hiring of an equity officer must not be seen as an endpoint, but the beginning of taking seriously racism and historic disparate impacts and outcomes, so policy can become a tool for real operational equity. We need to create a policy to address institutional racism because these forces run deep within systems, and without taking direct and decisive action, those status quo activities will continue in our district. Thank you.
you. Joy Butler, and then Dusty Harshman, and then Carol Fedrick.
Good evening. I'm Joy Butler, and my pronouns are she and hers. I'm a local faith leader, an LGBTQIA+ ally, and one of the regular protesters of the occupation of school property by Celebration, now for 42 Sundays and counting. The recent announcement by AISD to support Pride events is basically rainbow washing. In other words, this means appearing to be LGBTQ friendly, all while encouraging discrimination to flourish, supposedly because it helps pay the bills. PR campaigns will not rectify the immense and ongoing spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical harm to our children and community that comes from allowing outside groups to use our schools as a platform for hateful and oppressive ideologies. Isn't it funny how many evangelical churches want to rent public school property, even as they run their own private schools and homeschool their own kids? It's as if they might have an agenda to take over public schools with their values of bigotry and exclusion. Just maybe? Meanwhile, there are over 36 churches in the Austin area on private property who live into the radical, inclusive love of Jesus Christ. Instead of cherry-picking Bible verses out of context to beat us over the head with, instead of spreading lies that being gay or transgender is a sin, and that is a lie, these affirming churches embrace and love queer kids for being their authentically beautiful selves, as God created them to be. They are creating a culture of love where all can thrive. Trustees, by supporting organizations that discriminate, you are contributing to a culture of hate in Austin, which will lead to unhealthy outcomes for our most vulnerable. I encourage you to find a better way. Please be a better school district for our kids. No hate in our schools.
Thank you.
Good evening, trustees and Superintendent Cruz. I want to support the previous speaker who floated the idea of regional civic leadership and social justice academies as a tool for bringing our communities together. Other programs like Toolway Dual Language seem to be evolving in a regional direction using choice to better balance their enrollment, and I support any initiative that creates more socioeconomically balanced schools. I wanted to relay a simple observation gleaned from 4 community visiting sessions that I attended. There, we had large posters that suggested 15 to 20 campus-level academic performance, human capital, and financial measurements. Being familiar with district data, I noticed that each poster revealed several measurements which were directly correlated to a campus's economically disadvantaged profile, which itself was nowhere to be seen. In AISD, our schools with a high percentage of economically disadvantaged students tend to see greater per student spending to the tune of hundreds of thousands and millions per campus, which is a very good equity tool. Yet, they also see more students transferring out of their zones. They also have lower campus utilizations, less experienced teachers, and lower standardized test scores, reading rates, and readiness factors. These factors define the social science problem facing the district. Yet we are preparing to close schools without acknowledging the social factors that seem to drive the decisions we're making. Let's create schools that bring communities together. They inherently reduce the predictability of who succeeds and fails, interrupt practices that negatively impact students of color, and cultivate unique gifts of every student. I'm inspired by our students and teachers who believe in this equity evolution, and I'm hopeful for the think tanks to come and the district's hiring of an equity officer. Maybe we'll get this right yet. I wish us calm in the months to come, and thank you.
Thank you. Carol Fedrick, and then Anna Wen, then Catherine Gonzalez.
Good evening. I'm Carol Fedrick. I'm here to address the claims of evidence-based sex ed curriculum. I've given you a packet that includes information taken directly from the study on Get Real that I personally purchased, so that you can see their statements about missing data, the resulting data manipulation and misleading claims that occur throughout this evidence-based study. AISD says the new sex ed curriculum will be evidence-based. Evidence can include a lot of opinion and manipulation, especially when the researchers work for or were themselves the curriculum developers. Purveyors of all CSEs say they are evidence-based, but the evidence in the summary of the Office of Adolescent Health shows that CSE had similar results in sexual activities as other health curriculum, and in some cases, no curriculum. It's Your Game had an increase in sexual activities for girls who took their courses. Even if you find a bona fide evidence-based curriculum, modification by AISD will invalidate any study that's been done. As for curriculum, AISD writes themselves, where is the evidence for that? What unbiased evidence-based studies are there that prove sexual orientation and gender identity curriculum has changed anything? Changed what exactly? And for whom? Show us the evidence before you start experimenting on our children. As for the 4 pages of inclusion material that AISD added to the Get Real curriculum, I'm not alone in strongly objecting to 11-year-olds being taught the confusion of non-binary, genderqueer, agender, bigender, gender fluid, cisgender, etc. It is not appropriate. I also, and thank you for your respect, I also included studies by secular experts in behavioral fields that should raise red flags for all of us. Studies about the power of suggestion, the reality of social contagion, that simply asking questions about social non-normative health behaviors increase those behaviors. Please, please, stop the madness. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna?
Good evening. First, I would like to commend you on your decision to spend rental revenue from the Celebration Church for the AISD Performing Arts Center to facilitate Pride activities for AISD students. It's a start. It's great that LGBTQIA+ AISD students will be able to attend the Pride Parade. It's a really, really empowering, comforting, loving event for a queer person to be able to attend. I'm the VP of Operations for PFLAG Austin. We march in the parade every year. I remember the first time I went to the parade. I will never forget that. Unfortunately, this year, that euphoria for the AISD students attending the parade will not last past August 10th. On August 11th, they will be back to their reality. They will be back in an environment that can be more supportive, more acknowledging of their existence. So I would like to urge you to initiate ongoing initiatives to increase inclusivity, awareness, and diversity, not just for LGBTQIA+ AISD students, but for all ostracized minorities. Thank you.
Catherine Gonzalez, and then Colin Gray, and then April Zalatnik, and then Larry Abraham.
Hello, trustees. My name is Catherine Gonzalez, and I am the Operations and Programs Director at Out Youth. For the past 29 years, we have served over 25,000 LGBTQ youth here in Central Texas. And what you are receiving right now, before it is available to the public tomorrow, is the Safe Schools Policy Brief, which was put together by the Stories and Numbers Collaborative, a partnership between the University of Texas at Austin, Out Youth, and Equality Texas. It outlines 5 areas that any school district can follow to ensure that every student that they serve feels loved, acknowledged, and accepted for exactly who they are, and that they have an equal chance to get an education in a place that is safe and affirming. We invite you, and in fact challenge you, to take the lead in Texas to adopt all 5 of these recommendations. Some you are close on, but all 5 of them must be in place in order to make sure that our youth, every single one of them, knows that they are valued in this community. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Colin Gray. As we've been discussing, AISD rents public school space to Celebration Church every Sunday. Celebration Church opposes same-sex marriage, denies the humanity and dignity of trans people, and has mentioned LGBTQ folks in the same sentence as pedophilia and bestiality. The hate that Celebration Church preaches on Sunday escapes the walls of their rented church and poisons the surrounding community. Their kind of hate drives LGBTQ youth to depression and suicide. Their kind of hate inspires the violence of bigots. Their kind of hate can be literally fatal for LGBTQ kids. AISD has raked in about $180,000 in rent money from Celebration Church, and they've now pledged $35,000 to help kids attend Pride in August. Homophobia and transphobia are year-round. Pride comes once a year. While I'm sure this pledge of $35,000 is well-intentioned, it's a flawed choice for 2 reasons. One, any money gained from renting public school space to a den of homophobic, transphobic bigots is blood money. The better choice, the brave choice, would be to stop renting space to Celebration Church altogether. 2, there are better ways to spend the rent earnings than on Pride. Pride's great, but it's a once-a-year thing. The goal should be to fund an ongoing commitment to LGBT youth that benefits them daily in material ways. Efforts should include counseling for LGBTQ students, ally training for AISD faculty and staff, easily accessible trans-friendly restrooms, and educational resources written and developed by LGBTQ people. An organization I'd like to highlight is Out Youth. They're awesome. Listen to them, follow their instructions. LGBTQ kids have the same right to a safe, enriching environment as any other kids. If the political will to cut ties with Celebration Church does not yet exist, let's build it. In the meantime, AISD can use the funds, hopefully more than $35,000, to support LGBTQ youth in a comprehensive, sustained fashion. Thank you.
April. Then after April is Larry Abraham, and then Vincent Tovar.
Ladies and gentlemen of the school board, first of all, thank you for your time today, and thank you for your leadership of our children. I am absolutely certain that you must make many difficult decisions, and for that, I commend you, really. We are here because we care about our children and we want the best for them. Our nation was founded on principles that have kept us strong for over 250 years, including adhering to the laws in place to protect us, such as the recently passed SB 22 that was passed and put on record May 24th that prohibits certain transactions between government entities and an abortion provider or its affiliates. Parents should be able to preview the full sex ed curriculi, particularly of the new proposed Planned Parenthood sex ed curriculi, including videos, reading materials, and role plays online to approve prior to August. And truth is, parents should have a right to choose from many different sex education curriculum rather than students being put before only one or two that convey values that many families in our community may not agree with. As leaders in our children's lives, we have the opportunity and responsibility to shape their minds. We must help guard their thoughts because they will become who they believe themselves to be. Thoughts are seeds that become beliefs and choices that lead to their future. Our children today will either build or destroy the future, and we have the opportunity now to influence that outcome. Many things around us will change, but we must adhere to our core values outlined in our current laws if we are to protect freedom for all and to stand the test of time. Thank you.
Good evening, friends. I'm Larry Abram, a longtime resident of Northeast Austin. The school consolidation process being discussed will exert the greatest challenges and burdens on students who need the most support to achieve academic excellence. The low enrollment schools under discussion are also low performing and have high percentages of low income students who neither begin school nor progress through school fully prepared or supported to achieve their academic potential. And poor academic performance in these schools has caused many parents in these neighborhoods to look elsewhere. Closing and consolidating low-income schools will increase the trauma in the lives of the involved families and students. It will not address the root cause, the failure of the district to provide all the resources needed to assure all students in all schools achieve academic excellence. This is a result of how we have chosen for decades to deliver education. There's no reason to believe that all students in any neighborhood cannot achieve academic excellence. However, there is clear evidence that it takes more attention and resources for some students. Equity means giving every student what it will take to achieve academic excellence. By not doing this, we are causing poor academic performance and thus low enrollment through resource allocation and reactive approaches to inequity. We need to instead a proactive approach that provides every student with supports necessary to achieve academic excellence, including stable, experienced, high-quality school leadership and teaching, lower student-teacher ratios, an extended school day, attention to nutrition and hunger remediation, modification of the leveling policy, before and after school care. There's an excellent analogy to this situation in the debate over climate change. The planet is warming. The reactive approach focuses on the best ways to sustain life as we know it. The proactive approach focuses on changing what we are doing that is causing the Earth's warming. Similarly, we are causing decreasing enrollment by how we resource low-income schools. The solution is to stop being reactive and proactively address the causes of all low academic achievement by addressing all needs of all students. All means all. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Vincent Tovar. I'm a parent at Go Valley Elementary and Fulmore Middle School. And I want to thank you first and foremost for the pay raises for teachers and direct service staff. I am the Go Valley CAC co-chair, Go Valley PTA secretary, Martin PTA secretary, Eastside PTSA member, and Eastside Campus Architect on the Eastside Campus Architectural team. And I was just chosen for the Central Region think tank. And I say all this just to actually for everybody listening, if you're on a think tank, if you just got selected, if you applied, just everybody district-wide, I say all my roles to relay the realities on the ground of what our parents need. Let's say if a school is closed in East Austin, the only thing you can replace a school in East Austin with that families could accept is true affordable housing. 3 years ago, when Foundation Communities put in its proposal for housing at Allen, I had parents at Go Valley asking me over and over and over again, what's happening at Allen? Are we going to get housing? Over and over and over again. That's the only thing. They need housing. I'm grateful for the new buildings at Go Valley and Eastside. I am. And I apologize I don't say that enough. I'm grateful. But the families that are sending their kids now are not going to be able to send their kids there in the future at those new buildings if we don't have true affordable housing to honor the fact that they have sent their kids to those schools to keep them open in the first place. The second thing that I want to say is to please revise the superintendent's scorecard in August and September to go into effect in the 2020-2021 school year, because I know this school year has already been decided. For those of you who don't know, you probably think that the superintendent scorecard, which evaluates the superintendent on a yearly basis, includes democratic decision-making, transparency, school closure, teacher turnover. It doesn't include any of those things. None of those things. So all of that heat, all that pressure put on our teachers in Title I schools, our principals, our students, the superintendent doesn't feel any of that pressure because it's not on the scorecard. I urge you to do that. Please. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Dolly Lambden, then Candace Ayler, then Vivian Ballard, and then Jessica Sokup.
Good evening. We have a sign in our front yard that says, "We support public education." And we do, because we believe we must educate and care for all the children, not just the ones that come from supported, enriched environments, not just those who have parents who are fighters who will speak out and seek the schools for their children. Unfortunately, all doesn't mean all yet in AISD. There are still some groups of children who are not mastering important skills. When this happens, families with means look elsewhere and enrollment drops. Consolidating schools will cause additional disruption in vulnerable children's lives. All students deserve stable, stimulating, effective educational environment. Not one where there is higher than average staff turnover. Not one where teachers work double time to help students address past inequities and yet are still told they're inadequate when test scores come out. Not one where leveling practices disrupt the stable, safe start to the school year. All does mean all. If we are to have equal education, all children must have their needs addressed. Some children need smaller classes, more time, more physical activity, response to intervention, and more enrichment activities. Some children need help meeting Maslow's hierarchy of needs. All means all. If consolidations of schools must happen, then the disruption should be shared equally in all parts of Austin. This is unlikely since the low enrollment schools are located in East Austin. So consolidations must be kept to a minimum and resources allocated so low enrollment schools become super attractive choices. Schools with low enrollments have lost students over the years because parents see the school as being inadequate for their child and have voted with their feet. So you, Dr. Cruz, and you, members of the Board of Trustees, must ensure that resources are allocated so that all schools thrive. Let's live up to the slogan, all means all. Thank you.
Candace Ayler.
Hi, my name is Candace Ayler, and I'm the pastor and minister of justice of the Anti-Fascism Non-Christian Church. We are the group that has been protesting the Celebration Church hate group having services on public property for 42 plus weeks. The first thing that I want to make very, very clear, there's been a lot of information in the media in the last week. Celebration Church has not changed their policy. It's right over there. It has never changed. They changed a little bit of verbiage on their website. They never changed their policy. That policy compares my existence to bigotry, to bestiality, to pornography, to pedophilia, to incest. That is still what they believe. And that is the type of mentality and ideology from which our district is profiting. That is beyond problematic because it incites and continues to facilitate the bigotry that our students experience, that they've told you that they experience, that trans students told you when you surveyed them that they experienced. So people that went to Celebration Church were the same people that literally attacked Spencer and Tristan in the streets of Austin in January. This is the direct translation of the bigotry that churches like this promote and the harm that it causes us in the streets. So spending that blood money, there is no such thing as equitable or inclusive bigotry. Your numbers don't add up. $3,200 for promotional materials, $2,000 for refreshments, $800 on security. There's snipers on the roofs during Pride. What kind of security are you buying? Does it really cost y'all $4,000 to gas up a bus? I don't believe it. This is smoke and mirrors. Pride Austin, by the way, for everyone listening, has never charged AISD a fee. For the last 3 years, there has been no fee. And I confirmed today that there is no float this year. So I'm very curious what you're actually spending this money on, or if this is all, again, more smoke and mirrors. 5 trans women have died this month. This is Pride Month. And this is how you act like you support our community. It is egregious, and it is not going to continue to be tolerated. We will continue to fight this fight.
Thank you. Vivian Ballard.
Good evening, trustees. I'm Vivian Ballard, former member of the SHAC, and I'm here to talk to you about SHAC's HSR recommendations and shame. My emails have laid out the rationale behind SHAC's recommendations, but I want to step back and look at the bigger picture, why we made the recommendations we did. Some folks are trying to make SHAC's recommendations on HSR seem like they're crazy pants. They're not. They're based on the best available information that we had access to. Though a bit more guidance from the board would have been welcomed, and the recommendations have the support of the majority of Austin's parents. Teaching children factual information about their bodies, hopefully reinforcing lessons from home, has been shown to produce numerous positive outcomes such as delaying sexual activity and decreasing instances of child sexual abuse. Remember, 20% of children are sexually abused by age 8. We grown-ups have a hard time discussing sex because most of us grew up in a culture where shame, shrouded discussions about our bodies, and vulgar slang terms were more commonplace than the actual names of body parts. Shame derives its power from the unspeakable, says one of my favorite authors, Brené Brown. We on SHAC have heard from medical and legal professionals that children who don't know the proper names of body parts aren't adequately able to describe improper touching, and abusers are escaping prosecution as a result. Pediatricians tell us it's never too early to teach children the proper names of body parts. In our society, kids are pretty much 2 clicks away from porn, which we all know is not a reliable source of information. It's an unspoken reality we need to change. Children in our community deserve to know that their bodies in all their glorious variations are normal. I'm happy to talk to any of you at any time about these recommendations, and I really hope you respect the RFP process that the district created, that you follow the district policy that focuses on the whole child, and mean it when you say all means all. Thank you for your time.
Jessica.
Superintendent Cruz, President Rodriguez, and trustees. My name is Jessica Sukup, and I am a lesbian transgender woman and board member of the Transgender Education Network of Texas. I'm here to speak on behalf of LGBTQ students at AISD. I acknowledge and welcome the funds you're committing in order to participate in Austin Pride, but I also ask that you acknowledge the increased obstacles to success of LGBTQ students and that you commit additional resources targeted to improve LGBTQ student outcomes and overcome the incredible wave of suicide among LGBTQ students. It is well documented that LGBTQ students often have to struggle to be successful despite withdrawals of support from family, friends, and their community. These conversations and discussions, though, often leave out students who remain quiet and closeted about who they are. They suffer in silence as they listen to people around them say horrible things about LGBTQ people. I want to tell you that they are listening as you commit to participating in Austin Pride, but they're also listening as they see family and friends attend Celebration Church in their school. The American Academy of Pediatrics lists the attempted suicide rate among transgender students at 41.8%. Almost 42% of transgender students actually attempt suicide. Study after study has told us that a single supportive adult can make the difference between attempting suicide and not. It is virtually vitally important to train counselors in the schools competency in dealing with the LGBTQ students, but we must go even further with cultural competency training for everyone else who works at the school. Please invest additional resources like the ones I listed and in support of LGBTQ students. Thank you for your efforts.
Next is Mary Elizabeth Castle, and then Nicole Sturm, and then Jim Harrington, and then Jared Breckenridge.
Good evening. My name is Mary Elizabeth Castle, and I'm the Policy Advisor for Texas Values, the largest organization in the state of Texas that stands for faith, family, and freedom. I'm here today to address the school board on their choice of sex ed curriculum called Get Real, which comes from Planned Parenthood. And I must ask the school board, are they for real? Over 1,000 Austin citizens have contacted the school board in opposition to the sex ed curriculum. Members of the Texas Values staff have children in Austin ISD and have informed us that the process for reviewing the sex ed curriculum is difficult. I have discussed the issue with the Texas Senate offices, and they are warning you that if this board purchases more curriculum from Planned Parenthood, the school district will be bombarded with lawsuits and the expense of the legal fight will fall upon the taxpayers in Austin. Let's get into the Get Real curriculum, which gets too real with students. In 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, students are encouraged to engage in sexual role play, and authors of the materials even admit that role-playing sexual situations will be embarrassed for 7th and 8th grade students. Kids are taught in 6th grade how to enter into dating relationships with older partners. The curriculum specifically talks about a 15-year-old girl dating a 25-year-old man. In 7th grade, there's an entire lesson on sexual orientation, and in 7th grade, there's no discussion of actual STDs, the names of them, the risks of them, the symptoms, and the complications that they create. And in 8th grade, it requires that an HIV-positive person come and speak as a role model to the children. With all that I mentioned, does Austin ISD really want to implement this type of sex education for children? Come on, Austin ISD, get real. Thank you.
Nicole.
Hello. Is this thing actually working?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hi, Board of Trustees. Hello. My name is Nick Sturm. I use she, her, hers as my pronouns. I'm here today in regards to the Celebration Church rental agreement, which honestly I wish this was already resolved. I'm sure y'all probably wish it was resolved too. It's a huge emotional burden on all of the people who participate in standing against the homophobic and transphobic rhetoric that comes out of that church every Sunday. And I'm sure it's an emotional burden on all the students, faculty, parents who are LGBTQIA. We have the AISD shirt, and their allies. So the recent news was talking about a portion of the 180K being used for pride activities. But I was looking at the internet, and it turns out that they're renting at a significantly discounted price compared to similar facilities in the area. So they're literally getting a discount to preach their hate. I want you to think about that and consider what would happen if another nonprofit with an even more outward hate speech policy wanted to rent the Performing Arts Center. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, there are at least 82 hate groups that have tax-exempt status. With the heightened tensions in America and the unabashed hate groups like the ones that showed up at the drag queen storytelling in Leander recently, you should really consider what opening up the doors to Celebration Church does. Will you sell our children out to another hate group if they decide they want to rent? Will you sell out another community that it affects? I want you to think really hard about this and use some money for measures of care, not just pride activities. Care as in LGBTQIA counseling, ally training, restroom access, education. I've seen firsthand what homophobic and transphobic rhetoric can do, and I wish as a child I had access to positive sex ed. It probably would have kept me from suicide attempts. And these are real life experiences. These are evidence-based. I know many of my friends have experienced the same situations, and we urge y'all to take this seriously and make our lives safer. Thank you.
Good evening. I was listening to Larry Abraham and Dolly Landman talk and reflected on what I was going to say about one of these regional visioning sessions I went to. And I remember the last time Cheryl Bradley was here and said to y'all know what to do, y'all know how to do it, you just don't do it, and you just won't do it. In the visioning conference or session that I went to, it was advertised it was supposed to get feedback from the community about the plans for the future and feed it into the think tank. Well, the one I was at, the Bertha Means School, it was a one-way talking, and it was double talk. It wasn't asking the community for feedback. It was telling what you are going to do, what's already in the plans. And the thing is, I get it. It's shameful, but I unfortunately get what's going on. I mean, the plans are drawn. You all know what you're going to do. And so one indication of this is why did you not have a regional session in deep East Austin? What's the story on that? You have 4, none in East Austin. Why not? And these are the schools that are more at risk. These are the schools you already have planned for the chopping block, I'm sure. That's what we'll see at the end of the day. Back to Cheryl Bradley. You all know how to do it if you want to do it. You just won't do it. And you'll have to examine your own consciences as to why. The second thing is, that I don't get, is why are you shutting down the Science Leadership Academy or program for 4th graders? This is one program that brings minority kids in to the school during the summer and helps them with science. What's the story on that? What is the story on that? What is the story on that?
Thank you.
Good evening. Uh-oh, am I on? I can't even hear myself. All right, cool, no worries. Good evening, everybody. Kind of hurts me. Okay, so recently I had the opportunity, I'm very invested in the success of the students that you guys serve, right? You guys are elected to serve for the better interest of all AISD students, right? However, I kind of talked to you guys about this in the past. It's the academic achievement gap, right? I did my own research and I've discovered that it's not nothing that's unique to Austin ISD. It's actually something that occurs at all districts all across the state of Texas and beyond. However, I was very displeased when I used the TEA website and discovered that within the past 3 consecutive years, Austin ISD has had the highest or widest academic achievement gap of all Travis County independent school districts and a few surrounding independent school districts. That's displeasing. As one of the people said already, a lot of people already said, all means all. And if we're not providing the resources, if we're not trying to figure out what the problem is for our black and brown students, you can stop saying that, really. As a soon-to-be certified teacher, I dread to even come to Austin ISD if I'm going to be, taking part in that, right? All right. Second part that I'm going to talk about is renaming, right? School renaming. You guys have dusted your hands and acted like you've done something, right? You have not done anything. There are still several schools here in Austin ISD that are named after slave-owning people. I've talked to several of you. You have said, yes, that is something that we're going to do, but there seems to be no, you know what? I don't know if y'all really got it. I thought that y'all had it, but I guess y'all don't. You know what to do, as the gentleman just said, but you just won't do it.
I turned off my mic. Ken Severus, Helen Miller, and Teresa Rezo.
Good evening, Dr. Cruz, board members. I'm Ken Zarafis, President of Education Austin, the Employees Union for AISD, and I taught at Burnett Middle School for 12 years. When I came into this position, there was a $5.4 billion cut 9 years ago to public education, terminated 1,100 teachers. One of them was my partner. I saw directly how it impacts families and how it impacts an individual. We have fought for years to put the right people in the legislature, to make sure that the right people that we believe will support our beliefs are on the board. And we have rallied and we have worked very hard that 9 years later it has actually come to fruition. We appreciate the constant working together to finding a way to make a real pay raise for all of our employees. 7% for teachers, counselors, and librarians above 5 years, 6% for everybody else, decompression, stipends, an almost $50 million compensation package, the largest in AISD history. We are very proud of it, and I'm very proud of the people that continually stand with us and stand up, and our members that have shown up and fought hard to make sure that that has happened. I want to share with you briefly an email that I received today that just really set me back. Hi, Ken. It's from a teacher. Congratulations on the victory. Education Austin delivered. This will be my 20th year in the classroom. It was to be a make or break it year for me financially. I had drawn my line in the sand. If a substantial raise didn't go through, I would have to leave teaching after the 1920 school year. The raise went through. I can keep teaching. The raise went through because you and others like you organized and inspired people to get the right folks elected, because you showed up at the meetings, you spoke effectively and tirelessly on our behalf. You spoke on my behalf, you listened and you worked, you bought pizza, made signs, and got people into t-shirts. Because of your advocacy, I can stay in the profession I love. I owe you for that. Thank you for your service to the Austin teachers. Y'all are one of the good people, good guys. I'm proud of this. This is why we fight so hard. This is why we come down here. This is why we rally, because we believe in our teachers. We believe in our kids, and that's what this is about. Our children and the people that make it different, the custodians, the bus drivers, the front office, the food service, everybody that changes kids' lives. Thank you for that, but it's not enough. We have to look to next year. We have to keep doing this, and I'll talk to you in a few minutes about that. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, President Rodriguez of the School Board Trustees, Dr. Cruz. I have several concerns I want to speak about tonight. I am original Austinite, and I'm one of those kids. I'm from the Booker T. Washington Projects. So it's not that a child can't do something, It's who's in front of that child that can make a difference in that child. I also want to say, we sitting here and we talking about resources. The schools in my community still doesn't have all the resources they need to have to make our children successful. If you come in my community where I live, you see Apple buses, and those kids are not going to the schools. Over by Sims School, you see Apple buses. It's because most of the parents find out that AISD is not putting the right teachers in the classroom, the right leadership. You don't have fine arts for our kids. They don't have recorders to start playing in elementary school so they can go into band when they get to middle school. And then they can't get into band because they got to take remedial courses because they're still reading on the 3rd grade reading level. So, you know, this is not a new thing. This has been going on for decades. And I really and truly, everyone needs to start. This is going to be my 5th year sitting on the CAC board at Alternative Learning Center. We've got a cancer spreading around here, and it's not just in East Austin, it's not just in South Austin, Southwest Austin, Northwest Austin. So there needs to be something done about the big issues that are happening all over this city with these kids. Also, I want to say, I don't care about nobody liking me. I don't care about nobody liking me. I'm all about these kids, but you are going to respect me. That's the bottom line. You're going to respect me. And it's funny how other people can use their tone of voice, say what they want to say, but when Helen Miller says something, I have to get scolded. Another thing, we've been asking for LBJ High School to get a professional power wash for the last 3 years, and we still haven't received it. So don't tell me nothing about equity or anything else, because I know. And I've had cousins that have been bused from 12th Street to Springdale all the way to the new Anderson High School. I've had cousins bused from 12th to Springdale all the way to Fulmore and Travis. So we know the struggle. We know what it's like. And to Dr. Cruz, I want to say to you, and I'm going to say this, some of your staff are not honest people, they're arrogant, and when somebody tell me something and tell me they're going to do it, I expect for them to do it, because if I tell somebody I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, or say I can't do it. So I'm giving that to you. Thank you.
Good evening, board. Sit down. Good evening. My name is Teresa Razo, and I'm a proud bilingual teacher at McBee Elementary. First of all, I would like to thank you for the 7% raise. That sure is going to help. You don't see me here with my left sign, so that's a good sign. And my next thing will be to consider the insurance when we are negotiating again, because I don't want my pay raise to end up in taking a big chunk. Second, as a former administrator at a former charter high school out of Austin, I know how it is. I used to be a principal. I knew I had to pull out selective students. That's why I'm not there anymore, because that is not what I believe. I believe in serving all children, and therefore I moved to Austin to serve my bilingual children. But coming to Austin, I was at Sanchez Elementary, great bilingual program there. Lucy Reed also had a great bilingual program, but I don't see that at my school. I taught 90-10, but then those students that were with me, I don't want to be them being pulled out because they're deficient in English. How are they going to know English if I taught them 90-10? So I want our schools in the north, just like the south, those families from the riverside have been displaced and are moving to the Runberg Breaker area. So I want those students to be served bilingual as well. If we say that we are a bilingual campus, then we need to be serving those children bilingual, dual language. I just see that it's a disservice that we are doing, that we're not serving all children. All means all, just like the rest of my colleagues here said. I hope that by me being here speaking, I'm not going to be threatened later on, but I'm here to voice my concern for the dual language program, because I want to be the voice for those parents and for the children. Thank you so much.
Gracias. I'm going to go back. There's one person who didn't speak. Megan Dougherty. Are they here? Not here? Okay, then I'll go to the wait list. Gloria New Neighbor.
Good evening. I'm a school volunteer in Windsor Park in District 1. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and to participate in the reinvention sessions. I believe that there are many stakeholders in the district who do not truly understand the challenges in schools that are serving a majority of low-income students. As PTA stresses, we should be here for all children. To quote from Austin's Community Action Network, "Equity is not equality, and it is not about fixing people, tinkering with systemic barriers, and creating more programs. It is about becoming critical lovers of our systems so that we can transform what is wrong with our systems that have predictably served the same groups of individuals well and predictably served the same groups of individuals poorly for centuries." We look forward to the hiring of an equity officer who hopefully will report directly to the superintendent. We need to start thinking about students in schools on the east side as an opportunity for us to grow and learn how to teach better, administer better, and do better. What we are doing to harness the assets, what are we doing to harness the assets that students and families bring to our AISD community? And how do we honor all of them? If we really care about all students, we'd be putting more into figuring out how to keep all students in our schools and not let so many bleed out off into the charter schools, who have an intense way of advertising, who offer longer school days, and who have limits on accepting students. I believe there are successes and challenges in low-income schools that others do not fully understand and for which the district could be doing more to promote and support. Please, can we truly look at all programs and needs at individual schools, and rather than just disrupting the most vulnerable children, work as a district as a whole and come up with compromises and equitable solutions for all students? Thank you.
Thank you. So this concludes public comment. Trustees, are there any questions or clarifications? So please remember, since public comments are not specifically posted for discussion tonight, board members are legally restricted to either make a statement of specific factual information, recite existing policy in response to an inquiry, ask that the subject be placed on a future agenda, or ask staff to visit with the speaker about the issue. Trustee Letitia Anderson. Oh, I'm sorry, Trustee Teish. And any others? Yeah, Trustee Teish.
I had several questions. First, I would appreciate the administration sharing with the board its decision process for the use of funds from the rental of the PAC to the Celebration Church. I too had questions as to whether or not some of these funds could be used for education, training, and more support rather than just being given to the Pride Parade, although I do respect the Pride Parade quite a bit. Secondly, we had a speaker having a concern about the African American course at Austin High School, and I would like for us to have an update as to what the issue there is and whether or not we're considering spreading that throughout the district. That should do it.
Thank you. Trustee Singh. Anderson, sorry, Letitia.
So I wanted to find out more information on the canceling of the Science Leadership Academy and power washing at LBJ. And also, is there any type of survey or anything that was done, and if not, LGBTQ student outcomes? Thank you.
Okay. Trustees.
So the first thing, well, really the main thing I wanted to bring up is that we just, we talk so much about equity, and we just very much, I think, need an audit of our academics and arts programs across our campus. I really feel like if we don't correctly identify what the gaps are, we're never going to get to the right solution. And at these hearings, they're so helpful for me because I keep hearing like little snatches of grave inequities at some of our campuses, yet I don't have a place where I can go to and see that all listed out. And I would love for us as a board to consider this at our next board ops meeting to see how this might fit into our policy, to see if we have a policy on this exactly. This was really going to help us operationalize what we mean by equity. And it's really going to force us, which I think in a good way, to address some of the issues that we've heard tonight.
Trustees, any other issues, concerns? I think we'll add the last item on academic and arts groups to the operations meeting, and then Dr. Cruz, I think all the other issues are more questions to be answered. So I think that's right. Okay, great. So thank you, trustees. The board will now move to public hearing. This is the time in which the public will have the opportunity to comment on the FY 2019-20 recommended budget and tax rate. And board members again wish they could engage in a conversation with speakers on matters of concern and interest to the speaker that is not part of tonight's agenda, but in accordance with section 551042A of the Texas Government Code Legal, board members may only make a statement of specific factual information or recite existing policy in response to an inquiry, propose that the subject be placed on a future agenda, or ask that the speaker visit with staff about the issue. Speakers have had the opportunity to sign up for the public hearing either by phone or in person. In order to provide as many opportunities for input as possible within a limited time period at this meeting, each speaker will be allotted 2 minutes. Speakers may sign up by phone or in person. No substitutions or yielding of time to others is permitted. As you come to the microphone, there's a device that will light up as you move through your 2 minutes of allotted time. When the buzzer sounds, please quickly sum up your comments and offer the microphone to the next person, as another speaker may be patiently waiting. Should you wish to offer additional remarks that are not bound by time, please give them to the AISD officer on duty. Each board member and the superintendent will be provided with a copy. The Office of Translation and Interpretation provides a Spanish language translator for audience members who need assistance when addressing trustees or need assistance understanding comments made to trustees during public hearing. If you need this service during other portions of the meeting, please speak with the interpreter. Jennifer Williams, Spanish translator and interpreter, will repeat the message in Spanish.
La Oficina de Interpretación y Traducción proporciona un intérprete al español para las personas en la audiencia que necesiten ayuda al comunicarse con los miembros de la mesa directiva o si necesitan ayuda para entender los comentarios que se están haciendo a los miembros de la mesa directiva durante el tiempo dedicado para comentarios públicos. Si necesita este servicio, por favor hable conmigo, Jennifer Williams.
Gracias, Jennifer. So the first speaker tonight is Ken Serafis, and then Hannah Friedman, and then Heather Merritt, Mac McCormick, and last but not least, Elias Ponvert.
Good evening, board. You get a twofer tonight. This is quite a deal, isn't it? So, I'm Ken Zarafis, president of Education Austin, and taught at Burnett Middle School for 12 years. I am so proud of the people behind me. I'm so proud of the people that fought for all that we're realizing in this budget. This is a bold budget. This took a lot of hard work, and we're very proud of the people that stood up to make sure that this happened. I think that one of the things that we really wanted to get across, but this isn't the end. We have to look at more investment as we go through. We want the board to approve the budget. We want to approve all the hard work that we've done and all the people that helped us do this. But we know that it can't end. Next year, it can't go back to business as usual of a 1.5 to then mitigate what happened this year and to make it just a normal year. We have to step up and we have to give people hope to stay in the district. It's very important. I'd like to suggest on a couple of the issues within special ed, within community schools, how do we take some of the money that we have and invest in those areas? We know that community schools will combat inequities. How do we make sure that kids have a fair chance? How do we do that very intentionally with this money? Perhaps even with the issues that we have with Celebration Church and the problems that we've been dealing with for 42 weeks, there was a, with the HB3 and looking into next year, how could we take money? Are the rentals essential to the functioning of our district? If the KKK was to rent one of our buildings out, would we allow that to happen? Would we feel good about it, or would we feel obligated to have to do that because it's a public space? I think we would not. And I think that's the same way here when we're dealing with hate. Can we take some of the money that is in HB3, contribute that, and offset the money that's coming in through the rentals of these spaces and eliminate the support of this bigotry and this hate? We want to think about things creatively, collectively, and look forward to next year by doing just that. So let us see what we can do to increase equity and to stop bigotry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Cruz and Board of Trustees. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Hannah. I'm a member of Education Austin and Educators in Solidarity. I've been a teacher in this district for 8 years, going on 9. It's the only place I've ever taught, and it's truly my life's work working here. I want to thank the school board and Education Austin for all of their work in approving the 7% raise for teachers, counselors, and librarians who have been doing the important work for 5 or more years, and the 6% raise for direct service staff and for teachers that have been teaching 4 or less years. Approving this raise means we no longer have to make hard decisions about if we can actually go to the doctor's appointment that we had scheduled or if the copay is too much. It also means that we can start to tackle bills, student debt, and have more options of place to live in the ever-expensive Austin city limits. I know that teachers being grossly underpaid is nothing new to this school board or anyone sitting in this room. What I want the board to know is that this raise and this investment in your teachers and other campus staff will yield greater academic outcomes as well as social and emotional learning skills for all of our students. This raise shows that the tireless work that we do is valued and our salary is beginning to match the amount of work our craft takes. However, unlike other professions, we view this raise as a way that we can give more to our students on a daily basis. I guarantee that most teachers in this district are starting to think about the PD they can go to over the summer to further their craft instead of working a full-time job or being forced to teach summer school. We can give more to our students because we have time to read about best teaching practices, network with other educators about innovative teaching practices instead of running to a second job after work or filling our schedule so tight with out-of-school tutoring. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Cruz and trustees. Thank you. My name is Heather Merritt. I'm a special educator at Travis High School, and I have 2 students that attend Cunningham Elementary. I have been with this district since 2004, and so I want to thank you all for this raise of 7% for our teachers, counselors, and librarians, and 6% for other staff. This is really, truly an investment in our community. This is an investment in our kids, and this is an investment in the institutional knowledge of our educators. I've already heard from people that are wanting to stay longer, that are wanting to come back to the district because of this raise, so thank you. I appreciate all of the effort that it took to come up with this budget. I just want to say while I'm up here that 100% I support sex ed for all kids. I taught life skills for 12 years, and I dealt firsthand with kids that were abused, that were low verbal. I had kids that were pregnant. I had kids who did not know that they were being abused or that those parts were not to be touched. They did not know. They had never been given access to sex ed until they were in my class when we talked about all of the things and said all of the things. They had never had access to it before, so I 100% support sex ed for all. I also want to say I support the LGBTQ efforts of my brothers and sisters. Putting money towards Pride is not enough. Again, I have firsthand experience supporting kids who are coming out and having to deal with all the complications, talking to their parents, talking to their friends, their peers, being bullied. It's not enough just to put money towards Pride. Think about counseling, think about support groups for these populations, okay? I really came up here to talk about special education. I appreciate the stipend that we're gonna be seeing an increase, the $500 increase. Again, that'll make a big difference. My understanding is these positions had been hard to fill previously. In this district, we do not pay for ARD facilitators. We are paying special educators as teachers, case managers, and ARD facilitators. So while I appreciate the increase of $500, we need to think about training our folks better for ARD facilitation and dealing with those complicated discussions and meetings. And $500 isn't enough to be doing 3 jobs. Thank you.
Mac McCormick.
President Rodriguez, Dr. Cruz, trustees. I am Mac McCormick, math teacher, life teacher at Keeling Middle School. Not the magnet program, but Keeling Middle School, where the rubber meets the road. And I would like to thank you all for, you don't know what this is, do you? I know you don't. Thank you, AISD School Board. This is what we do on a daily basis in our classroom to get the kids motivated to learn by coming up with creative things for them to learn. That's what I do. I have completed 25 years this year as a teacher. Before that, it was over 20 years in the United States Army. I'm still here dedicated for my fellow teachers. I drove a school bus when I was 16 years old. And I know what it takes to be a school bus driver. I know what it takes to be a cafeteria worker when I didn't have anything to eat in the cafeteria from my home, and they gave me food. I know what the custodians do. And I want to thank you. We just turned the pages. We must keep on going. You had a lot of moments tonight. What's the difference between a moment and a movement? It's action. We need action.
That's right.
We need to respect and value our employees. I tell my students, they ask me, they complain about this. My question to them, and my question to you, what are you going to do about it?
Thank you. Last speaker is Elias Ponvert. And that is all of the speakers that were signed up. This concludes the public hearing. Trustees, are there any questions or clarifications? If not, thank you very much. We will now move to the consent agenda. Are there any consent items that trustees would like to pull for a separate vote? Trustee Matthias?
I would like to pull item 12.1 for a separate vote. Like item 14.1, I will be recusing myself on both items. A firm with which I share some of my time has relationship with various firms in the built environment, so I will be off the dais for that.
Okay. So just to confirm, 12.1 and 14.1?
14.1 is already pulled.
Okay.
So
just
I'm pulling 12.1 for the same reason.
Okay. Trustees, any other, trustee Singh?
Yeah, I'd like to pull 13.6, please.
6. Okay. Yes. Trustee Matthias, you made a motion to pull item 12.1. Is there a second, trustees?
I'll second.
Trustee Ellens. Trustee Singh, you made a motion to pull 13.6. Is there a second?
Happy to.
Who was Ty?
Trustee Teish seconded. Trustees, any other? Trustee Ellens.
Yes, the administration has requested that we pull agenda item 11.4, the contract for school mental health centers, to allow more time for negotiation and finalizing an agreement with the provider. There will be a short-term agreement created to ensure continuity of services during the summer, and a final agreement will be brought back to the board in August.
So just to clarify, Trustee, there's no motion that's needed on any of that. That's just for information
Correct,
purposes.
it's just the rationale
Okay,
behind pulling.
Great, thank you very much. So 11.4 is pulled.
One more.
Trustee Singh,
11.5, please.
11.5. Is there a second for a motion from Trustee Singh to pull item 11.5?
Second.
Trustee Teish is seconded. Okay, trustees, any other consent items that you wish to pull? Okay, so Secretary Ellens, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Okay, someone check my work, but I think the motion is to approve items 10.1 through 11.3, 11.6 through 11.7, 12.2 through 13.5.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
So having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Teish to approve consent items 10.1 through 11.3, 11.6 to 11.7, and 12.2 to 3.5. All those in favor, please raise your, I'm sorry, there a second? Sorry, is there any discussion on any of these items? Trustee Cindy Anderson.
I just have a quick clarification question on item 12.2, the approval of the vendor list for the 21st Century Learner furniture. It does have a notation that there is a fiscal impact, but yet this is a vendor list. And so my first question is to clarify a fiscal impact to a vendor list. And then secondly, if we're just approving the list now, does that mean that there will be additional contracts with individual vendors being brought back to the board for approval at that time?
So who would, who's able to answer that question for Trustee Anderson? Matthias?
Matthias Segura, Operations Officer. Beside me, I have Jennifer Nix in our procurement office that oversees construction management and was the lead person on the furniture procurement.
Correct. Good evening.
So I think that our plan was to give you the estimated spend for the dollar amount here, and we've listed all of the possible budget sources. However, we will do task orders and contracts on the individual projects for each school as they arise.
Correct. So what's happening now in the process, this is Matthias, is that we're having our design architect work with the campus to determine what complement of furniture is going to be required for each modernized facility. So we do not know precisely what the quantity will be. We do not know precisely what the vendor will be. What we did do is pre-qualify all of these vendors and distributors because we know that they can do the work and they can do it in a way that meets our specifications within our furniture guidelines. That being said, once we have a determination regarding what the expected allotment of furniture is, then we will issue a task order, and then that will actually be routed back for President Rodriguez's signature. But it wouldn't come back to the board for an actual motion. It just wouldn't function that way.
So what is your sort of total estimated spend on the furniture component of the project? Because I did not see that figure listed here.
Yeah, so the budgeted item total for the 2017 bond for all furniture is $30 million.
38?
$30 million.
$30 million. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Trustee Ellis?
I had a question on item, I think it's 11.7, sorry. The interlocal cooperation contract for the juvenile, for the JJAP with Travis County. First of all, I really want to commend the district for this work. We talk about equity and all means all, and this is a group of children that we have not been directly addressing their needs historically, but now it looks like we are going to be the providers of the educational content. So that's exciting. My question though is, will we be performing assessments, basically special ed assessments, academic assessments like that? Maybe that's the wrong word, but evaluations I think is a better word. And I'm gonna ask that question with if you've been following the dyslexia conference that we have every year, we've had a speaker for the last couple of years named Amir Baraka, and he is an actor, but he was imprisoned in the Louisiana prison system, and the only way he found out that he was dyslexic was because Louisiana took on the task of evaluating all of their inmates for reading disabilities. So I'm wondering if we have considered putting that into this work, applying that same concept. Is there anyone do you know?
It's something we can look at. I'll ask Dr. Reach to come forward if he has additional information on that, but we would be providing educational services, which would include review of IEPs, understanding how a student is progressing, also specifically on reading fluency and reading comprehension.
That's exactly right. As a reminder, the JJAP receives students from multiple districts.
Correct.
There's many partner districts that are a part of that. But yes, we will provide any of the required testing to those students if they're there during that time when they need to be tested. In addition, state law actually requires that all of the juvenile justice alternative education programs use the Iowa test of basic skills. However, the county will provide that test to those students, and they're trained to do so. And so they will still be responsible for providing that test. But then as far as IEPs, they're still responsible for reviewing IEPs and providing any accommodations that are needed. Currently, the agreement does not say that we would do additional evaluations, but that is something that we can discuss with the county. I would need to understand better how it was done previously under the previous provider. My understanding is that they would refer that back to the home district.
So I'm just going to caution us when we say we will be responsible for reviewing the IEPs, that assumes a child is coming into the JJAP, I can't say this, JJAEP with an IEP already, meaning they've already been evaluated. So what I'm suggesting is that we use this opportunity to identify things that might have been overlooked. And whether that's in our district or other districts, I mean, I think all children deserve that. And one of the things, if you read all the data, they estimate 15 to 20% of students have dyslexia, but 60 to 80% of our prison inmates have it. So I would encourage that type of work and including that. And
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Letitia Anderson.
I just wanted to follow up with the comment on Amber's question. What will we do as a district to ensure that those students that are at the JJAP do not repeat their stay? Would there be any practices or anything in place to ensure that, students do something different?
Part of our approach, and I'll ask Dr. Reach if that specifically was addressed in the contract or in our work, but our approach was still around academics and social emotional learning. We would also monitor recidivism. Now, there are other laws that come into play when a student is then assigned to a JJAEP. So there may be some differences there, but as far as the instructional approach, still around very much standards-based instruction, but very much around social emotional learning. And there's also a very specific focus on restorative practices, because that would be our approach as a district. So we actually did meet, and I also, Dr. Reach and the leadership at JJAP or with Gardner Betts, to actually talk about our approach. Like, if we're in, this is our approach, and this is what we believe in. And very much with Chief Medina and her staff are very much on board with the way we would go about instruction in a classroom and supporting students. Dr. Reach, anything else to add to that?
No, that's exactly what I would have said. When we started those conversations, we told the county that if we're going to provide the services, we want to ensure that we're using our SEL curriculum and that we're embedding that in the programming and that we are increasing restorative practices at the campus. And they were very excited with that prospect, and that's what we plan on doing next year, which will be different than previous years.
Thank you, trustees. Any other questions? If not, having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Teish to approve consent agenda items 10.1 to 11.3, 11.6 to 11.7, 12.2 to 13.5. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion passes unanimously. And now for the items that were pulled from the consent agenda. Items 12.1, 3.6, 11.5. Secretary Ellens, do I have a motion to approve agenda item 12.1?
11.5
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just doing it by the order of the motion. Sorry.
Let me go in order of
Agenda
the.
item 11.5.
Okay, we'll start with item 11.5. I move approval of the administration's recommendation for item 11.5.
Is there
Second.
a second? Is there a discussion?
Yes. First of all, can somebody help me find this? I don't see it, the printed version of this. I had seen it online, but I don't see it in our notebook. Has anybody?
It might not have been there.
Okay, it might not have been there. Okay, that's fine. Well, so I had a question. This was regarding the contract to WestEd. And I just wanted to know if we could get a little bit more background on the specifics of what they were going to be offering. This is about a $157,000 contract. And from what I saw, it was a very general paragraph on coaching services and that type of thing. So I was hoping we could get a little more detail on that.
Good evening, trustees. This is the third year of work that we've done with Michael and Susan Dell Foundation on formative assessment, and so it's the third year of a grant from Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. We've been working with WestEd. For the upcoming school year, we're really looking at taking those 60 coaches. This will include some of the staff from professional development, as well as some of the tech design coaches that we work with, as well as all of those academic coaches that are now fulfilling dual roles, and we're really credentialing them across areas to understand deeply the practice of formative assessment and how we elicit evidence from students to see where they are in their learning. A deep understanding as well of learning progressions, which are really ways to measure where a student is in their learning towards mastery of a standard. So it's an essential first step, or more continued steps towards standards-based grading. We'll also be working with more principals at the middle school level, as well as really looking at site leaders on our pilot campuses, as well as expanding now to several middle schools, and then bringing leaders together. So there's about 30 plus days of on-site professional development for our district and campus leaders, as well as observations that WestEd comes and follows up with, instructional coaching, and then also some online modules that they'll participate in.
Okay. Thank you. And so what are the actual, could you tell me how many staff are going to be, like, from WestEd are going to be working on this, and what some of their specific deliverables are going to be?
So they'll be training, they'll be conducting the training, preparing the training. They also sit in on our design teams. We're pretty picky about who they bring in, so we want to be sure that we have the very best staff from West Ed. We've developed relationships with them, and we know who really works well in Austin. So typically they travel in about 2 to 3, depending on how big of a group that they're delivering to.
Okay. I wanted to just get a little bit more information on our contracts process. I've noticed that some of our professional services contracts are a little bit vague sometimes, and I don't know if that's intentional or if that's, if you can describe it now, I'd appreciate it, but if not, we can have a later conversation. But I am really curious to know just what level of specificity we put in our contracts and why, because I feel like that's probably an area that maybe we can do a little bit better. And just from my perspective as a trustee, as somebody who has to approve these, it's kind of hard sometimes to understand what exactly we're getting.
Okay, we can certainly follow up as far as on the specifics of what's written into the proposal, that if we include specific deliverables such as professional development, the dates, the times, how it's going to be delivered, we always make the assessment of, first of all, can we do it ourselves? And the other is, do we have either the time, support, resources, bandwidth to do it ourselves or not? That's where the administrator for that area would then determine we're going to put out an RFP. Whether it's going to be school, district-wide, or a particular pilot, such as this situation. But the work that Dr. Goodnow mentioned on formative assessment and standards-based grading is part, when we talk about reinvention, that is part of our movement around enhancing teaching and learning. That we actually identified standards. It's still part of our theory of action for teaching and learning. It is around standards-based instruction and social and emotional learning. The standards-based instruction piece includes the curriculum, the instruction, the assessment, and then the professional development. And we make decisions of which one are we going to actually develop and which ones are we going to enhance with other support from other areas. But that's just sort of the way we approach it. But I do think within we can have another conversation to see what specifically is going to be in that contract. Because obviously we're talking about here with something around formative assessment or moving to standards-based grading, that is impacting 6,000 teachers. So the scope of it is pretty significant. And of course, this is just the time for training, not for monitoring the implementation or professional learning communities where teachers really have an opportunity to come together and talk about how the work is moving forward, what are the bumps, what do we need to come in and sort of reinforce as we go to some type of change theory, specifically here on this one on teaching and learning.
Thank you. No, that's really helpful, and I think that gives us some really good context for this particular contract. And I think that what I was referring to more is understanding better, like the qualifications of the people that are actually delivering that, how many, what their hourly rates are, how many days are they going to actually be coming out, and that type of thing, just so that we can really see what we're getting for that money. That's all. Thank you. And that might already be in their proposals. It's just not something that's been shared with us, so. Thank you.
Trustees, any other questions? If not, having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Teich to approve agenda item 11.5, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Secretary Ellens, do I have a motion to approve agenda item 12.1?
Make a motion to approve agenda item 12.1 as recommended by the superintendent.
Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Letitia Anderson seconds. Is there a discussion? Trustee Cindy Anderson.
I have a similar question on this item to just ask for clarification on what the dollar amount tentatively budgeted is, given that there is a intended fiscal impact, but we don't have any detail as to kind of a total estimated amount.
Good evening again, Jennifer Nix. I believe on this agenda item, we did not put a total budget amount as it varies depending on the fund. This was a request to extend funding. We had a similar on-call agenda item in 2018 for campus support, and we're asking to extend that same funding, that same approval to the 2017. The 199 fund and the 2013 fund, and it will likewise also be on for tasks, and we will do individual contracts. But we did not put a funding a dollar amount on this particular agenda item.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, is there a legal requirement that there be a specific amount to an approval on a contract, or is an open amount acceptable?
If I may, there will be individual.
Sorry, it's a legal question.
I understand.
Not a contractual one.
The nature of these procurements is that you can't ask for that fee in advance.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
On the professional qualifications, you can't ask for that fee in advance. It has to be negotiated after the qualified proposer is established.
So we can vote for an open-ended contract that we don't have a number on. So we're
We're requesting approval of the on-call list, not an individual contract here. This is similar to a previous request for an on-call consulting list from which we will draw to do the individual contracts.
So if the contract amount is over $100,000, are you required to come back for a vote of the board?
It will go to you for signature.
That's a different question. So just to clarify for the board, so we are approving an on-call list where it doesn't matter the amount of money, it'll come back for just the president's signature, but not a full vote of the board.
Correct. However, we have discussed.
So Nicole is shaking her head.
Well, we've discussed updating you with a board update as to those agreements that are over 100 that only require your signature but not the full approval of the board, so that the board has line of sight into those agreements.
Nicole?
So agree. So under law, we can't ask for pricing for a request for qualification. We ask the board to approve the vendors, typically by rank, and give us the authorization to negotiate the contracts. The law precludes us. We have to look at qualifications, and we can't take pricing into consideration. And follow up to Trustee about the details of the contract. Typically, we reference the proposal. We do an RFP, and we reference the proposal herein under the contract language, so it doesn't have the detail. Their proposal to the RFP includes the detail behind what we're actually procuring services for. We typically don't involve trustees during sort of the RFP process to the evaluative process until we recommend to give feedback, because of course that could present some conflict of interest if we have that kind of information disseminated before we actually make a recommendation to the board publicly. So those would be my two feedback comments on that. But this is approving of vendors, and we'll ask for a ranking, and it allows us to go down and negotiate individually with those qualified providers.
So just to clarify, there are no advisory committees or committees appointed by the board or by the superintendent administration that are reviewing RFPs or approving contracts or recommending contracts?
Correct. Not at this point. We did have a sort of a task, a subcommittee in CBOC that was reviewing, again, under advice from the administration, because we had gotten into some instances where there was some the appearance that certain you can influence an award, and so it's typically you would not have your board sort of throughout the solicitation process until we publicly make the recommendation. And so we don't have any advisory bodies reviewing the results. These are usually done through an internal working group committee. We review the qualifications, and we make sort of ranking decisions about who qualifies under the solicitations, or if we make a recommendation to award a proposal, that's typically done by an evaluative committee. And it changes depending upon the actual service, scope, or goods that's being procured.
Thank you. Trustees, any other questions? Trustee Ellens?
Can you further explain, though, why the contracts don't come back if they're over the $100? I mean, whatever that number is. Because it was always my understanding that any contract that's over that limit would come back.
Unless it's accepted under law, which is sort of the request for qualifications.
Unless it's
exempted or accepted under the law. So in the case of qualifications, we go to the board and ask to the authority to negotiate and enter into agreements. We don't bring the actions back twice because that authorization allows us to execute those agreements. Now, if the board subsequently wants us to go and do it and bring them back, I think it's going to obviously expose us to some potential delays and risk. But the contract sort of negotiations are something that, it can, some of them are timely, but most of them, these ones are sort of more sort of routine. And so the complexities of the contract are really, the complexities are in the proposal themselves, and they're referenced in the contract language. And so we typically try to scope out, to the extent that we can, the level of detailed service required before we actually sort of finalize the contract terms. And certainly those are, typically the contract terms are negotiated by our legal staff and their legal staff once we have the authorization to move forward with the execution of the agreements. But I think if there's any critical questions around the spend or the scope, certainly we would, I think a lot of that is contained in the RFP to in some degree.
Trustees, any other questions? If not, having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Letitia Anderson to approve agenda item 12.1. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. So the motion passes unanimously by all those on the dais. Secretary Ellens, do I have a motion to approve agenda item 13.6?
So moved to approve agenda item 13.6 as recommended by the superintendent.
Second.
So Trustee Taish. Okay, is there discussion on item 13.6? Trustee Singh.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this equity officer. I really appreciate the district and Dr. Cruz for giving us this opportunity to vote on this person. I would like for you to take a few moments, if you could, to reassure me as a trustee and the general public that this position will have teeth, that this is not just an administrative sort of paper pushing position. I know that's not what you have in mind, so this is your chance to kind of share that. But also, one way to think about it perhaps might be to maybe share like what you would hope this person would do in his or her first 100 days, let's say, particularly with regards to the school changes process. For example, one of how that person might help influence how the guiding principles are being used, and that sort of thing. We talked at our last meeting about having a percentage, limiting the percentage of low-income students that would experience school closures, and we were going to delay that naming that percentage until the equity officer is hired, et cetera. So if you could go into some specifics, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, well, I will say that our candidates are very familiar with Austin and with Austin ISD, so that's always a good thing. This is not the beginning, and it certainly isn't the end. So by hiring the position, it doesn't mean like everything has been resolved. So it's really a readiness on two pieces. One is about the individual coming forward. Really excited about this opportunity for an individual to look at all areas of equity in our district, looking at functional items of policy, of staffing, of finance, of academics, of facilities. So it is multifaceted. What I see, and a part of readiness is the individual coming in, but then also coming in to take the lay of the land and how we're going to then bring different parts of the organization together to support this particular office as one. The other part is really the readiness of the school district. So it works both ways. That's a pretty significant one that sometimes I hear, and you didn't say this, but many times I hear, what will that person do to come in and just sort of address it all? Well, the readiness levels really come from us. How ready are we to address something like this? Where we've done well, call it. Where we haven't done well, call that as well. And making sure we're making improvements and moving this in the positive direction. I'd say the other piece to this is, and what I see I will see happening in the first few days, and the individual will come in with an entry plan to actually look at our data. It's really triangulating the data by looking at just not numbers and reports, but by talking to people, but by also looking at community members so that their information will be triangulated based on what we know, based on what we want to do as far as outcomes. There are many artifacts that we already have in place, such as a scorecard that's referred to, such as our strategic plan, such as the school changes that we've discussed. There are a lot of artifacts there that individuals can really hold on to see, well, look at it through the lens of equity. I really do see the individual asking some important questions for us on a day-to-day basis, not just us asking ourselves, but us asking one another as well. And I really do see this as a development piece for our entire district. And equity across different areas. Demographics, socioeconomic status, special education, students with special needs and special services. So I see it multifaceted. But I see this that we're going to be learning a lot from this particular individual, but their expertise and what they bring to the table.
Trustee Wagner and then Trustee Matthias.
Well, I as I've I think brought up, I guess it's about my third or fourth time now to express concern that that this role may not have the teeth or the support, or that I haven't felt like I've had clear substantiation to be able to see that. More than anything right now, we need this role to be effective. And this role has to be not only given a list of responsibilities, but we have to make sure as an organization that there is true support for change management, and that your role as the superintendent, Dr. Cruz, is to hold the recommendations that come from this role and the research that drives this role will really be imbued into the culture and guiding principles of the organization and the values of the organization, since that comes from you and the management of the organization. But my outstanding questions at this point are still, where does this role fit into the org chart? You've mentioned that the role will report directly to you, but I haven't seen functionally where this fits within the organization. Who are the peers of this role? What is the reporting structure underneath this role? As well as how will this role and this office be resourced? I heard you for the first time tonight mention an office and not just an officer. So what does the resourcing look like for that office?
So I will be sitting with the individual coming in once they have had developed their entry plan and start taking a look at our organization of what it's going to take. Juxtaposing that against our vision and our goals, what is that really going to take? What are the resources right now that we can leverage and actually make sure that they are coordinated in a way to get better outcomes for students and for families and our staff? So like I said, this is not the end just by hiring a position. It's a continuation. More change will come from it. And I do think when you talk about change management, it's an important term, because I do think the organization will need to be responsive to that change. It's not just going to happen because none of us believe that that'll happen, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be here right now. But it is something that I see the individual coming in to help and direct, support this work. And I'm very supportive of this position. I do believe it is the right position for us. I do. I absolutely do. If I didn't, I wouldn't be bringing it forward. I do think it's going to bring in some areas where we're strong, and we're very proud of it. It's going to bring up some other areas that we may not like it when we hear it the first time. And that's okay. I think that's where our understanding, it's going to push our understanding, push our knowledge base, making sure we're still working in the right direction for all of our students. But again, I see this as a continuation. I do not see it as the end. And hiring a position is not going to get it all done. But it's important. I do see this individual asking those right type of questions with my full support to enact these changes. And we'll bring these to the board as well, so we can see how the organization is changing and where we may even need additional lifts to make sure that we get some better outcomes for our students and for our families.
So am I hearing you correctly in saying that this role will not have any resourcing available to it for the foreseeable future unless that's brought forward in a future budget?
I don't know that it's another, it could be additional resources, but what I'm looking at now, it's taking existing supports and resources that we currently have that we can leverage and maybe reinvest them in different ways, such as the board has done when we were investing $31 million from last year's budget to this one. It took us quite a few months, and it was prioritized, and the board held steady. And in the end, well, if the board approves it tonight, we're to this point. but it's reinvesting $31 million that we had invested in different ways previously. So I'm not going to say just additional money coming in and additional supports in May, but I'm seeing about maybe even stop some practices. Maybe it's discontinue some programs, and we're going to reinvest them in a very different way. But I want to have this individual come in, and I wanted to see them from their lens and get their perspective.
But my point being is that one individual cannot assess a $1.6 billion organization with 12,000 employees and in 130 schools by themselves. That's an unrealistic expectation, and having that expectation without being able to bolster it with clear resourcing, staffing supports for that role, as well as being able to clearly account for where the role fits within the org chart. Those are the things that continue to be red flags for me about this role. I'm enthusiastic about the candidate that you've brought forward. I think that candidate meets the community values that were expressed for the candidate, but I still continue to be concerned that this role is not being equipped to be as effective or to meet the tall order that you're expressing it will meet. And I say this from having watched very closely the equity officer at the City of Austin, and to see when he joined the city and that role was created for him, he was drinking out of a fire hose for the first 2 years of his time there. And it wasn't until he started to have a staff underneath him and having clarity around the role that he was able to start being effective in that role. And that's where I don't want us to be in the position of just creating a role to create a role.
Correct, I agree.
And so that's why I continue to ask these probing questions as to how we clearly thought through how this role will function in the organization. And I still don't feel like I have clarity on exactly how it will function. So as much as I want to support the candidate, it's still challenging me for me to support the role when I still can't understand how it's going to be resourced and where it's going to fit within the org chart.
Thank you, Trustee Matthias. Sorry.
I just wanted to pause to recognize the historic nature of what the board is about to do. It was in 2013 that I went to a conference of the Council of Great City Schools and first heard of the idea of a chief equity officer for public schools, in that case in Jefferson County, Louisville, Kentucky. And so for us as a district to have made this slow march through our hub subcommittee, to our first ever disparity study, to our board committee on equity, diversity, and inclusion, to now seeing the realization through this action, this recommendation brought to us by our superintendent. When the superintendent told us at a retreat earlier this summer that he was considering this possibility, I was elated, and I know that there are many in historically underrepresented communities who shared my elation. So I would just want to congratulate our superintendent, but also to say that this doesn't let any of us off the hook. I think one of the responses I heard was, a chief equity officer? Why do you need a chief equity officer? Don't you have a chief human capital officer? And don't you have a chief business and finance officer? And don't you have a chief schools officer? And don't you have a superintendent? They should be your chief equity officer. So I think we all acknowledge that we're still on the hook for this. But at the same time, let's see how it is that together, with the help of this person, we might be able to address the persistent inequities and racism and segregation that we still struggle to shake. Si se puede.
Thank you, Trustee Singh.
So to follow up, so in August, we are supposedly going to vote or not vote, but we're going to be presented with scenarios. Do you think by then will that person have the time to have looked through and come up with a possible percentage of low-income students that we don't want to exceed who are experiencing school closures?
Yeah. That's a very, very pointed question. So I don't know that I want to just rely on that individual for something like that that's so important. It's just like we have staff and we've had discussions with board. It may come, but it'll have to come from us in discussions with the board. I don't know about just this one individual. This individual will be part of that because the board requested that. So, but to what degree or that level of specificity, that I don't know that this individual would be ready to make a recommendation and feel confident in that. But we've had some discussions, but they've not been that pinpointed. But we will. I will.
Thank you, because the scenarios presumably would actually yield some of those KPIs that relate directly to this. So I would hope that, whoever we hire for this role would really be involved with those early on. Thank you.
Trustee Anderson, did you have a question? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I saw you. Trustees, any other questions? If not, having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Teich to approve agenda item 13.6. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion passes unanimously. So thank you for that.
I should always thank the board for a unanimous vote, but thank you all very much. This is, but remember, we asked. So this part of the change management is us as well. So just, again, appreciate the board's confidence. I don't even know that I'm out of line even saying these things, but you'll tell me to stop talking. Stop talking, right? It's a good thing. It's a good thing that I stopped talking to.
Secretary Ellens, do you have a motion to approve the items for separate vote?
I do. These are going to come in a couple different rounds, but to begin, I move to approve agenda item 14.1 as recommended by the superintendent.
Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Letitia Anderson seconds. Is there a discussion on agenda item 14.1? If not, having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Letitia Anderson to approve agenda item 14.1, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those up, I'm sorry, keep your hands up for 1 second. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, 8. All those opposed? All those abstaining? The motion passes 8-0-0 with Trustee Mathias off the dais. So Secretary Ellens, do you have a motion to approve another item for separate vote?
I do. Next round will be, I move approval of agenda items 14.2 through 14.5 as recommended by the superintendent.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion on items 14.2 through 14.5? Having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Teich to approve agenda items 14.2 through 14.5, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed, all those abstaining. The motion passes 8-0-1 with Trustee Wagner abstaining. Okay. Vice President Cindy Anderson, do I have a motion to approve an agenda item?
Yes, I make a motion to approve agenda items 14.6 and 14.7.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion, trustees? Trustee Singh.
Just real quick, one of these motions is about bringing on-ramps courses, more on-ramps courses, and they are really awesome. I just want to say, I want to take some of these classes. Can I just take a moment to read some of them? I want the public to know. One of them is Thriving in Our Digital World, which is an entry-level computer science course. It also satisfies part of UT Austin's required core curriculum. There is Earth, Wind, and Fire, an introduction to geosciences. We have a Physics 2 course called Electromagnetism, Optics, and Nuclear Physics. Foundations of Arts and Entertainment Technologies. That is so awesome. So I just have to say, I don't think any charter schools are offering anything close to this. That's all I got to say.
Trustees, any other discussion? If not, I have a motion, having a motion by Vice President Cindy Anderson and a second by Trustee Teich to approve agenda item 14.6 and 14.7. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed? All those abstaining? The motion passes 8-0-1 with Trustee Ellens abstaining. Secretary Ellens, do you have a motion to approve another agenda item?
I think the last one is, I move approval of item 14.8.
Is there a second?
Sorry, as
Second.
recommended by the superintendent.
Happy to second.
Trustee Matthias, is there any discussion on item 14.8? Trustee Matthias?
I'm tempted to ask whether the maker of the motion might accept a friendly amendment, and that would be on the fourth attachment. It's a resolution on charter schools, and I am tempted to word it slightly differently for those who have access to attachment 4. The changes I would be tempted to make is that in place of the word "at the same" would be "at a," per student funding, and in place of "levels as," it would be "level that is not greater than that of," so that it would read, "TASB advocates for legislation that provides state funding for charter schools at a per student funding level that is no greater than that of the school districts where they are located."
Okay.
So I would ask for some help here. I've been told that there is no such thing as a friendly amendment. I'm amenable to that change. So how do I mean, should we consult?
You're able to withdraw the motion and make it with that as the wording, and I'm sure Trustee Matthias would echo his second again for that.
Can we have discussion before that from from staff?
It's up to Secretary Ellens if she wants to withdraw the motion and begin again, and if there's unanimous consent for that, that's fine. Otherwise, we would need either an amendment to her, or a second, and an amendment, or a vote on that motion.
I'm happy to go either way. Is it easier to just withdraw and start again, or would you like to just make that amendment?
Yes, if you want to withdraw.
Okay, I'll withdraw, and we'll
Okay.
start over, and can Trustee Matthias perhaps be the maker of the motion?
Happy
So-
to do so. Before
let me
that, do we
clarify.
want to have any conversation? Okay,
Could you read that again, please?
happy to.
So let's do this. So Trustee Ellens has retracted her motion. So Trustee Matthias, would you make a motion, and that way we can have the discussion over it?
Sure, happy to move approval of item 14.8, adoption of proposed TASB advocacy resolutions with the following amendment, that attachment 4 be reworded to say, TASB advocates for legislation that provides state funding for charter schools at a per student funding level that is no greater than that of the school districts where they are located. For the record, the changes that I'm suggesting are to be made then are, instead of the word "same," it would be the word "and in the place of the words "levels as" would be the words "level that is no greater than that of."
Great. And is there a second? Who was that? Trustee Ellen seconds. Discussion. Edna, do you want to?
No, I think that's a good amendment, and happy to answer any questions about any of the other resolutions.
So there's discussion on Trustee Matthias?
Sure, I just want to thank staff and administration and all who added to these recommendations. It's an important part of our process of governing not only locally but at the state level with districts throughout the state. So for us to be able to take to them some of these ideas, some of them I think every time I see the ideas that come from you, all four of these are inspired, like the monies that we spend on newspaper ads for other districts throughout the state. To be able to get behind these ideas is an incredible opportunity for not just our district, for districts throughout the state of Texas. So on behalf of all those districts, y'all are tremendous.
Thank you.
And President Rodriguez, we have to turn these in by midnight, so tonight, so I will be back for your signature.
I will be here.
Thank you.
So any other discussion? Seeing none, having a motion by Trustee Matthias and a second by Secretary Ellens to approve agenda item 14.8. All those in favor, please, agenda item 14.8 with the amendment stated. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank y'all very much. Next, we will move on to the superintendent's report. The first item on this agenda under the superintendent's report is the board budget development workshop number 9, adoption of the recommended FY 2020 budget. Dr. Cruz.
All right, so as we have Nicole Conley come forward on this particular item, just to highlight some key points from the budget. But I don't see Nicole. Oh, she's behind
she's
over
right
here.
there.
You're out of line of sight out of here. So with this particular item, and as George Gorgonis is also coming up, giving us then the authority to spend some resources in our schools to the tune of about $1.5 billion. Now, a lot of that is recapture, but nonetheless, this is what the action tonight from the board will do, is set in motion then the budget for this next school year. I will just on some highlights, just remembering from the board where we had budget priorities, those will still fulfill, specifically around student achievement. When we looked at making sure that all students are reading on grade level by 3rd grade, making sure that we are supporting all campuses, especially some campuses that were struggling on some outcomes. And the other was prioritizing teacher pay, where the board said, we want to pay everybody more, but let's prioritize teacher pay. So the Thrive, Read, and Excel, it's still represented in this budget, and the board approved that, I want to say maybe December or January of this previous school year. And so that is still in our budget. But with that, let me ask Nicole just to highlight some key points from this budget that we're asking for the board's approval.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Nicole Conley, Chief of Business and Operations for the district. Just by way of background, since we have new trustees, Texas Education Code requires the school board to adopt a budget by June 30th or August 31st, preceding the new fiscal year, depending on the fiscal year of the school district. The fiscal year for AISD is July 1 through June 30th. The budget must be approved before any funds may be expended in the new fiscal year. The funds that are required to be adopted by the Board of Education are the General Fund, Debt, and Nutrition Services Fund. The board must post in the newspaper on its website a notice of public hearing, a budget and tax rate, the notice and time of the place for the public hearing, proposed budget, proposed tax rate, state and local funding per student, and taxes on an average home within the district. The notice must be published 10 days, but not more than 30 days before the public hearing, which we've had on the proposed budget and tax rate. The public hearing must be conducted before the actual vote to adopt the budget, and the board must a motion must be made for approval to adopt the resolution of the budget by General Debt and Nutrition Services Fund by function. So these are requirements under law by function. So tonight is our recommended budget for board to take action to adopt the budget so we can begin expenditures of funds this coming July 1. A lot has been asked about the impacts of House Bill 3 on Austin ISD. I can say, in generally, it represents a significant investment in education. We're talking about $6.4 billion for schools, $5.2 billion for property tax relief. But it's the reduction in property taxes that really increases the state share to reduce recapture. It's not the same as reducing recapture by allowing districts to keep more, but it reduces recapture by the property tax compression. There's no more Chapter 41 under HB 3. All of the sort of laws associated with those previous chapters are 48 and 49, and it significantly changes the funding elements of the additions of new weights, modifying various weights, and eliminating certain elements from the school funding formula. So these are just high-level general. We've been through the details of HB 3 the last time we presented. So trying to ascertain the impact on AISD has been somewhat of a daunting task. It feels like there's been runs out there sort of being shared publicly by various entities and organizations. George and I have been laying under spreadsheets for the last week. We've agreed, and we've, in absence of guidance from TEA, which TEA indicates that it will not have templates for districts to model their allocations until probably till early or mid-July, because there's so much in the bill. We've made some estimates in our budget about what we think our entitlement is going to be under HB 3. Nothing is final. Of course, you know, some of the element changes in school funding laws is that we had one big unknown element, which is student attendance, right, and average daily attendance by the October 30 count. But adding the uncertainty of the property taxes really introduced another layer of complexity in sort of projecting the revenues for the budget. Not to mention, we couldn't sort of model various grant programs. We had to use proxy for the comp ed component of the elements. But having said all that, we think that based upon what we know today in terms of how the formula works, based on the data elements that we were able to glean from our system and the way our students look, and sort of mirroring that or forecasting that into next year, October 30th, even though we don't know what students are going to show up, we think we can generate about $88 million under new entitlements. We also think we can make $5 million on investment leverages of having the final payment in August. So please be quiet about that, because I'm not sure the TEA fully realizes their impact on the cash flow. We know that subsequent budget amendments are going to be required. So this is not absolute at this point in time. These are our best estimates given what we know, and we know that there's going to be variations because, one, the chief appraiser hasn't even finalized the certified values. We know
Did we all get Nicole's and George's humor? This is finance humor. Everybody gets a spreadsheet. It's like, I was gonna.
Y'all didn't even think it was funny.
I thought it was hilarious, and just
everybody gets a spreadsheet.
This is finance people humor. It's not implied. You got to be very. You got to say.
We just have to acknowledge there's a couple of funnies in here.
Okay,
I was waiting for the appropriate time to tell you how funny you were.
Well, thank you. Everybody gets a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because everybody had a spreadsheet, and they're all different, right? It's like no.
Yes.
When Nicole gives me the spreadsheet, that's a spreadsheet. Other than that, it's just a piece of paper, right?
Right. So there's all these competing spreadsheets that we try to reconcile for budgeting purposes. Yeah, we didn't really want to adopt a significant deficit in the budget when we know that we can anticipate some revenue to come into the district, but we just really had to sort of make our sort of best estimates as to where we think we might land. Tax rates, we know that there's compression in HB3, and so while we've maintained the same tax rate for the last 3 years, and we've actually lowered our INS tax rate over the last over the last 5 years, HB3 will cut the tax rate by 93%. So that's a 7-cent property tax reduction. And just for background, the maintenance and operation tax rate, it goes to sort of operating components of the district like staff salaries, benefits, utilities. INS is just to pay back debt on outstanding bond and bond requirements. So that I did a calculation of the taxpayer impact based upon the preliminary certified values. That tax compression will probably save the average homestead owner and median homestead owner $295 to $239 respectively. And this is based upon preliminary certified values that are not yet final, but this is just a way to sort of model what the tax impact could be for the 7-cent budget reduction. Again, we'll come back for the board to approve the tax rate subsequent to the final certified property tax values, and then truth in taxation laws. There is a lag. HB3 substantially changed school finance laws, and so there's going to be the comptroller is probably going to have to tweak some of the rules for truth in taxation. So we're all trying to sort of figure this out while we've got real new information, but we have to, obviously, we're under a deadline to adopt our budget. For fiscal year 2020, we're proposing a revenue budget of about $1.6 billion, and that for the General Food and Debt Service Fund. It's a total increase of about 1.6% based upon our current known economic conditions that we expect the district to experience. The recommended expenditure budget for 2020, again, similarly, totals about $1.6 billion, which include, when you look at sort of all the funds, just to give you, by way of background, general fund supports our day-to-day operations of the district. Food service fund has to be utilized for our cafeteria program, our national breakfast and lunch program, and then again, debt service is used to pay back capital bond program debt. Federal, state, and private grants are not included in the board approval budget allotment because granting agencies specify how those funds can be used. There's specific deliverables usually tied to the award of the grant. So we don't ask the board to approve every single grant because there are many of them and they change over time, and those are really directed by the actual grantor. The decrease in the general fund expenditures is sort of primarily sort of attributed to, is primarily attributed to the $60 million reduction in recapture based on current year. Under prior laws, the district would have paid $182 million more in recapture than what is being proposed in this recommended budget. So even though, so it's a decrease over the current year, which we're paying $673 million in recapture. We're going to go down to $612. But if we were under the previous law, we would be paying almost $794 million, almost $800 million in recapture payments. When recapture is excluded, the expenditure operating budget for 2020 totals about $813.8 million. That's an increase of over $45 million over the previous year, primarily driven by the proposed compensation increases that we've included in these estimates. We are asking the board for authorization to expend about $3.1 million in reserves to balance out the final shortfall between revenue and expenditures. But due to the significant infusion of funds under HB3, we've been able to offset the majority of the deficit that we were actually forecasting when we had the preliminary budget presentations, which puts us about a $44 million deficit, if you recall. Again, under law, the board must adopt the budget based upon functional categories as dictated by TEA. You can see by function, we spend most of our resources on instruction and support for our schools and our campuses. The next sort of the recapture is the largest line item to spend in the district's general fund expenditure budget when you look at it broken out by function, followed by instruction, and then followed by the next big spend category, which is maintenance and facilities. And that is sort of indicative of the conditions of our buildings in order to keep maintenance and custodial services up to par. Despite sort of prevailing myths, the general administration just represents 1.7% of the budget, which is well under the state average and under many of our peers. We're a business of people, so when you back out recapture, 86% of our budget, our general fund budget, is spent on personnel costs, and that's something that's been consistent. Dr. Cruz spoke earlier about our Thrive, Read, and Excel investments that we're making. We are actually investing almost $14 million into those board priorities. We've offset that with about $30 million in budgetary reductions to sort of realign programming to facilitate these new priorities. We had a deficit. We were expecting about an $88 million net new revenue. We were going to make some money off the investments. And the compensation package that's being proposed before you totals just under $49 million. And so that's why we're left with sort of a remaining sort of small shortfall. I'm sure Dr. Medina can take questions, but again, Dr. Cruz has already announced what this in the compensation increase. The proposed plan includes 6% across the board, 7% for qualifying employees with 6 or more years of experience, various stipends and pay adjustments, in addition to a new expenditure for the district, $8 million, since we're no longer exempted out of TRS for Social Security. So we and about 14 other counterparts now have to pay the district's contribution to TRS because it was formerly exempted, and now that exemption has been removed. When we look at what we're proposing under the compensation program for the average teacher's salary, that's a non-sort of PPFT, a 6% increase kind of places, when we look at sort of our surrounding counterparts, it places us like in number 2. We're still sort of behind sort of number 1, which was Leander. I hate to call out district names, but we're just $61 and $585 respectively behind Hayes and Round Rock. So even though we jumped to number 2, you're talking about a difference of $61 and $585 annually. And so I think our goal going forward to compensation to say, where do we want to rank? Where do we want to be to sort of set these compensation goals? And this is based upon what we know now. Not every district has adopted their budget, but based on what we think that they've announced that they're going to provide in terms of salary and compensation, this places us in number 2. But again, $61 spread between Hayes and $585 from Round Rock. I would also say that when we looked at our urban counterparts, we ranked number 8. We usually rank sort of like 8 to dead last, and sort of this kind of bumps us up to 8 if you look at sort of the 10 urban big districts across the state. You all know that, you know, the 5-year salary history, you all should feel very accomplished by what we're doing for our employees. This is a huge lift in terms of making sure that we can sort of close some of those competitive wage gaps that we were seeing when we were trying to attract and retain staff. This is an investment of $133 million over the last 5 years, once you include this year's nearly $49 million in expenses. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. That's just a voice. Recapture. Everybody's been asking about what happens with recapture, and again, we're paying $60 million less from the current year budget. We would have paid $182 million more in recapture had HB3 not been signed into law. We will still be the single largest payer of recapture, and so that will probably be something that will continue on in perpetuity. Unfortunately. Our unassigned fund balance, because we're only proposing a modest sort of shortfall that we want to sort of offset through reserves, we will be well within our board's fund balance policy. You can see that we were kind of dipping into reserves year over year, so it was slowly sort of tapering down. But since we've got this infusion of new revenue, it mitigates our requirement to actually use reserves. Now, I do think we're going to have to use reserves. The settle up swings are going to be very volatile in terms of entitlement because we're moving to current year. A lot of these tax settlements and appeals, it can take years for them to be fully resolved. We did work with Senator Watson to get some kind of bracketed language that we're not sort of penalized in the current operating year for years and years of sort of you know, settle ups, previous year settle up. I said, you know, it's important for us to be protected to some extent. So there is some level of protection for us when it goes the other way, when we owe the state. And so, but we also, when districts are entitled to more, they will get a plus up. But the volatility of the settle up process in that first year necessitates us to have reserves because we never know how far off the estimates are going to be. Again, it's all dependent upon the kids that show up who are in their seat and attending on October 30th, not just registered in membership, but we're typically off 5% from 100% of our enrollment. So it really is a conservative estimate at this point in time. Our enrollment, all of our sort of calculations under the funding formula is predicated on the loss of 1,600 students next year. So if we lose more students, of course we lose more revenue. And the demographic reports expects these trends to continue for the next 10 years. So you're seeing sort of the matriculation of lower birth rates sort of go through the system, and they'll probably continue and maintain. They'll be lower than historically just because of the behaviors nationally as it relates to birth rates. So budget stabilization in the out years. I know we wanted to make some substantial progress on really closing out some of these competitive salary gaps that we're seeing. So we're expending all of our new dollars all in the first year. And I think that the out years, because of that, it's going to necessitate for us to always to continue implementing our austerity planning for year 2, which would include school changes and other potential proposals to kind of offset future budget gaps. We do know that inflation is we're going to experience inflation. Our employee health plan, we had sort of this one-time pass this year where we didn't have to increase funding. Typically, we increase about $5 to $6 million for our employee health care plans. If we expect still more declining enrollment, so that's going to affect the level of revenue that we're going to bring in. We're going to bring in less and less revenue, coupled with the fact that our TRS contributions go up 1/10 of a percentage point every single year. So we're going to have these ongoing inflation costs for healthcare, electricity. All our bills go up the rate goes up every year, and so we will have to plan for out-year gaps because we don't. Because we've fully expended our projected entitlement. So we will have to be diligent about offsetting and stabilizing the budget in the out years as we experience as these trends sort of affect our bottom line. And that concludes the fiscal year 2020 budget that you have before you for approval. We're certainly here we can certainly answer any questions that you may have. Anticipation of approval of the budget.
So Trustee Wagner and then Trustee Letitia Anderson.
I actually don't have a question. I have a comment that I wanted to share. And first, it's I wanted to say thank you to Mr. Gogonis and your team. I know this has been a more complex than usual budget with the complexities introduced by House Bill 3. So thank you for all of the work to scrambling us here at the 11th hour. And I also want to say a very special thank you to Ms. Conley. And I have seen the level of leadership, drive, and passion that you have put in over the last 2 years in your time on the Senate committee and your time at the Capitol, the amazing level of advocacy that you have provided on behalf of this district. And we would not be sitting here ready to approve this budget with up to 7% raises for our teachers without your tremendous leadership throughout this process. So thank you very much for everything you've done.
I really appreciated the opportunity to represent the district and all districts for something that is so important to us all. And I mean, we had so much pent up need. We had to have change, and so I'm very. I appreciate the opportunity to sort of be there and be at the table to really get the kind of changes that all district kind of needed. I mean, we didn't win every single thing 100% for Austin, but I do think that we found a good middle of the road, and the state did put some significant dollars on the table. I mean, when you think about it, it's 3 times as much that they didn't pass the last legislative session. So for that, we're greatly encouraged by their leadership, and thank you so much for the honor to serve it on behalf of the district.
Trustee Letitia Anderson.
Well, I can't beat that thank you, but I'll say thank you. Where does substitute teachers fit in this pay raise?
Trustee Anderson, we have not discussed increasing that. However, there is, I don't want to go too much into it, however, we are designing through consultation with Education Austin, different ways that we might be able to solve around the shortage of substitutes in our district. Because that's really at the heart of what any salary increase or any, we would want to solve, that we need to fill those positions. And sometimes it's not a salary piece, sometimes it is where the campuses are located and substitutes wanting to travel across the city to fill different needs. And so we are going to be bringing forward a consultation agreement that is going to help us, we believe will help us solve the shortage of substitutes.
So I've had someone constantly reach out to me, and they believe it is the pay. And so I would ask that you look at that, because that could be potentially a future teacher here. So, I mean, if you're gonna look at increasing pay, definitely you wanna include those individuals who will be in the classroom when the teacher's not there.
We certainly will look at that. I know that the current pay system and current pay structure was designed in part to address some of the requirements of the formerly NCLB. NCLB had requirements that you had have certified teachers and just various requirements that are no longer in place once NCLB was put away. And so that gives us the opportunity to kind of look at the structures that we have that were put in place to be compliant with an old NCLB. And so we're also toying with how we can fill those positions because we're not having to meet some of those stringent requirements that were formerly in place in NCLB.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Ash.
So, first, let me say you're very funny, and I love the baby at the end. I'm just saying there was lots of funny moments in this. It's hard to make finance funny. Good job.
My question is something that you have touched on a little bit, and was hoping you might be able to expound on if you can, and you may or may not be able to, as far as the comment that you made that we are spending all of our dollars that we are keeping in the first year. And I do have some hesitation with that, and was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to things that we may need to be looking forward as future budgets come to us, things that, or how big do you, because I know we kind of stopped it with this year as we didn't project out farther than that. We do know that the recapture payments will continue to increase again. And so was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that. Literally the slide that you have up in front of us right now shows, it references the school changes process, and was just hoping you could expound a little bit more on what we are really truly looking at so that we can maintain these incredible teacher pay raises that are in the budget.
Thank you. That's a great question. We're actually going to, as soon as we get some additional guide or some guidance from TEA, we're going to be sort of doing the out-year forecast. But under what we know that our funding entitlement is going to be reduced just by sheer fact that we're probably going to lose students in average daily attendance. So we've already looked at some of the out years. We don't hold the same level of revenue that we would hold in the subsequent years. So the loss in revenue, which I'm projecting anywhere around 6 to 7 million, depending upon how many students we lose. I think that, again, health is going to go up anywhere from 5 to 6 million. We had sort of a one-time pass. And then any other new strategic priorities that you add on top of that, and we know that there are other small inflationary costs. I mean, our insurance went up, over the last few years just because that's the market, right? The conditions around the market, the flooding, it's driven up prices. So we will have inflation. I don't know that we'll get revenue to offset the projected increases in our costs. So we could be facing a shortfall again, which requires us to implement those austerity budget reductions that we have planned for year 2. The school changes will help, depending upon what the board ultimately decides. Those expenditure reductions will sort of help us offset some of those funding requirements in the out years. We're also looking at things like maximizing our schedules to see how if we're allocating more closely aligned, and seeing if there's any way to sort of make up or offset some of these potential budgetary shortfalls in the out years. But we absolutely have to be diligent about implementing our austerity plan, because again, we're on a trajectory of continued loss. And so either, you don't want to sort of, I hate to say the term right size, right? So the funding formula funds you for every kid in average daily attendance. If you don't have the kids, then you have to figure out a methodology to make an offsetting expenditure that translates into those kids. And as I've said to the state, the kids don't neatly fall into sort of these clean line items where you can reduce the budget that way. And again, all the policy decisions associated with sort of making funding trade-offs and offset are often very contentious, because we love all our programs. We don't, everything that we do now is important. It's always important to someone. But I would say that we absolutely have to right-size our physical infrastructure. You saw the outside of recapture and instruction, the next biggest cost was maintenance and facilities. And so because we're always going to be out of line from our peers and our averages, because our spend per pupil spend in those categories are going to be higher, because we haven't necessarily right-sized our infrastructure to meet the kiddos that we're serving today. We're still built on a system that can serve almost 88,000 kids, close to 90. And so we have to stay vigilant in the budget. We're going to be still working through our stabilization plans to make sure that we're balanced for next year, if we want to sustain the great investment that we're making into our employees. But it is going to require us to continue to retool and make our budget reductions down the road.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, then while we are able to do great things as a result of the change to House Bill 3 and the school finance in the state of Texas, we as a district are still going to have some difficult financial questions to answer, if you will,
as we move forward and in the out years. I feel pretty confident in what I think you're going to say when I ask this next question. Just knowing your work and the fact that we all stood up to thank you for your incredible work. But I do, again, because we don't have those out years, understandably so, as we're still trying to figure out the details, and kind of just the general situation that we find ourselves in with the legislature closing and then having to adopt a budget immediately. Do you feel confident that the numbers you have so far that we know will eventually be released will show a path to being able to sustain the investments that we are making so far?
Not from new revenue, because we're going to lose revenue. We're going to have to learn how to reduce our expenditures in a way where we can, we're much more strategic and is more aligned with the funding elements under law. Again, if you're funded based on students, you kind of have to sort of have you have to sort of build a system of infrastructure to support the number of kids that you're projected to have, because that's all that you're funded for. I will also say that while I appreciate the state leadership and putting such a significant infusion into public education, the longevity of such investments with the tax rate compression that the state has to fund with no new revenue sources at the state level concerns me. I think Austin is a very vulnerable district. We have high property values, and we would probably fare the worst, right, if we ever get substantial budget reductions coming from the state. And I know that the legislators wanted to hear about paying for it in the next session, but there's going to be a big price tag associated with tax rate compression that they haven't fully resolved and figured out. And so my fear about Austin is because we're so vulnerable, we're so high property wealth, and we're just kind of that unique anomaly that we are more vulnerable to such cuts should the state decide that it's going to constrain. I don't think the state would cut us, but they could certainly leave us here for another 30 years. The same sort of basic allotment, no changes in the elements. I don't think that there's a huge appetite unless taxpayers hold, legislatures accountable for continuing to make progress on this. I mean, this was like a big first step, but we need to sort of not let up in terms of putting pressure on the state. But there are a lot of concerns out there about the sustainability of the tax rate compression in the out years and whether or not that is going to really constrain school districts, which means that we have to absorb things like inflation through cuts if there are no improvements in the funding elements.
Got it. So with that in mind, I would love, President Rodriguez, if we could, as we are starting to come forward with our committees, place a importance on our legislative committee, that we understand the implications that will mean for our district moving forward, and that while they did just finish session, the work of the legislative committee will continue forward over the next 2 years so that we can effectively advocate for AISD and all public education schools in our district.
Absolutely.
So, thank you so much.
Thank you. Trustees, any other? Trustee Ellens and then Trustee Singh, and then I had a comment.
Sorry, I blocked you. Okay, thanks for that sobering reality. Could we just enjoy this a little longer? I do have some very specific questions. So the chart on the tax compression, our taxpayers this year will see a lower tax rate. So like in August, when August, September, we approve the tax rate, that will be that lower number.
Correct.
So that will affect the taxes that they're paying for this school year.
Yes.
Okay. And then I want to extend a thank you beyond this, but it affects this. So for you and Ms. Butts, really for the first time that I am aware, really fighting for Austin ISD schools in front of the State Board of Education to ensure that all students are actually provided with the best education that actually comes from AISD and not the competitors. It's the first time I've ever known this to happen. We usually just kind of expect all of this to happen to us and then we deal with it. And I'm just very proud, for those of you who don't know, that both yourself, Ms. Butts, Pete Price, Ty, I mean,
Veronica
so many
Sharp.
people. You can name them
Yeah.
if you want. I don't want to leave them out. Went and advocated for the State Board of Education to keep our students in a way that could have an effect on this loss that you're projecting. I'm
Yeah, it would have
hopeful.
cost us $85 million over the next 10 years. It would have cost the state over $20 million to sort of back fund charters, because charters get more money per pupil than the districts do. So yeah, it would have had a significant impact on our revenue, and so we need to start mitigating such losses to the extent that we can.
It's huge, and we hear from the public, what are you doing to stem the enrollment losses? And I'm telling you, people, they're working hard for it, and it was successful, and I'm thrilled. So I did want to ask, on the special ed stipends, there seems to be a weird caveat with that. Are those like every special ed teacher, or only those that are in inclusion, I mean in self-contained?
It's special education teachers serving special education students.
Any
so
students
it could be
identified.
inclusion. It could be in the
Okay.
in the
Okay.
resource pullout.
And then, are we seeing, I haven't seen it pulled out, but we closed a school in District 4 this year. Are we seeing any savings from that close?
We did, and we incorporated it into our bottom line, so we no longer allocate it separately. I'm sorry. Yes, and we factor that into our budget because we no longer had that separate line item of allocation. So we did realize that savings.
Do you have any idea how much that was?
I'll have to provide it subsequently, I know, but we sort of made the budget and we didn't have to allocate it. We'll go back and we can reconcile and get you that number.
Because I do think that was showing up.
Yep.
Next year, we are closing another school, I think it's in District 3, that is showing about a $50,000 savings. 500? Okay, well, fabulous. That's much better. Okay. Well, thank you for that work, and that seemed to have escaped me, so if we could get that number.
We believe it's like $500,000 that we
Okay.
assume savings, but we'll get you the final number.
Okay, well, that's good for us to understand. And then did you have?
I just want to mention that some of the things we talk about, we do say that they're hard decisions, but they're important decisions. This is about reprioritizing our funding. And it's these outcomes that we want for our students. So how can we use then, because there are 2 schools closed in the past 2 years, sometimes we say those aren't the real schools. They were really schools. I went to their farewells, at least to one of them, and then it comes into a savings. So while it may be a tough decision, it's one where we're focused on student outcomes and looking at this for the future. So we know that when money was going to come in, folks were like, well then, okay, we can all go back to where we were. No, we cannot. There are still student outcomes that we need to realize. There's still resources that we need to prioritize and spend in different ways. And so I just want to highlight the comments that you're making, because that's still the momentum moving forward. This isn't, okay, good, everything's been resolved. It hasn't. We still have issues around student outcomes, student achievement for all learners. So until that's done, we always have to come back to our support and our resources and making sure we're making the best investments.
I appreciate that, because we do hear, oh, we don't have to do any of the cuts now. That's a common statement, and so I appreciate the reality check. But it leads right into my last statement. On the slide with the Thrive, Read, and Excel, I'm wondering, you have a note that says the Excel investment is 1.04, but it's also, I would suspect, part of the compensation that we're doing. So I would love to see that updated with the real numbers, because I do think it's important for the public to realize that this board took a very proactive step in saying our budget does define our priorities, and we expect to see the dollars going toward our schools so that they thrive, our curriculum so that all of our students have equitable, rigorous, attainable curriculum, and that we're paying our teachers. So please take credit for it, because
it was our work as well. So appreciate
Right.
that.
We kind of had TBD because we were working down to
Yes,
the wire.
I do
But it
get
is a
that.
$50 million investment in our employees.
Thank
You're
you.
absolutely right.
Thank you.
Trustee Singh?
Thank you so much. This is really so helpful. I really appreciate all the work that you guys have done on this. It's remarkable. And
graduation from UT, and I was absolutely there to give them a hug because they have excelled. And I'm so proud of them. But again, it's not a banner. It's not anything else. It's just making a difference in their lives. And we need to acknowledge it. We can't just let it say, well, it just happened. It didn't just happen. There's effort in that. I also want to just highlight other work that we've done around dyslexia, around dual language, funding for students who are English language learners or not. We have supported dual language, and we need to continue to expand dual language opportunities. So we don't have to, we have the allotment, and let's go figure it out. We don't have to go figure it out. We have a model that we can improve, but we have a model here. But when we look at career launch, dual language, early college, high school, our dyslexia with our approach on CALT, full day pre-K and CTE programming for middle school, high school, now having the funding for that. Those are all items that are gonna, that provide students these better opportunities around access, better opportunities for all of our students. And I just want to highlight that because these are votes that the board takes over time, month to month, but it doesn't quite make the banner. It doesn't quite make the highlight. It doesn't necessarily need to, but we need to acknowledge that because there are kids and teachers doing this work every day that the board authorizes. And sometimes it's not stated, but it should, and I myself need to get better at that, which I will, but we have to highlight that work because that's making a difference for our students.
And I will say that the new funding elements allow for us to defray some of the costs of such program, like the transportation costs. We can, for high school sharing, our various CTE courses can be reimbursed. You know, we're getting reimbursed for student assessments like SAT and ACT. We can submit for reimbursement for those things. There's a teacher mentoring program. But just particularly for career and college and life, there are performance funding elements with CCMR in the funding formula. So for every student that we graduate that demonstrates post-secondary success, I don't know how you say it, like who's qualified under, you get bonus additional weights and funding for those kiddos. Now, granted, I did share that I don't necessarily like everything being tied to the performance of students that are no longer there because we have to serve the kids that show up. But that's a way to sort of incentivize the behavior that Dr. Cruz has just talked about. The state wants to see more put into those post-secondary success, and they're rewarding performance for CCMR. So if we're investing in those things and our students do well, it could bring in more monies for the districts in subsequent years.
Dr. Cruz, I'd also like to add, just to go back, because I'm glad that you highlighted PPFT as an equity indicator. Nicole stated earlier that non-PPFT puts us second amongst our peers. With our PPFT, it puts us first, and almost by $1,000 above our others. Where with us coming second, it's within $60 or so difference. But with our PPFT, it puts us way ahead. On average, a PPFT participant earns about $780 something, $83 on average. So, and that's something that you've authorized, to speak specifically to Dr. Cruz's point.
I think, Dr. Cruz, I think from my perspective, I've had a time to kind of reflect over the last couple of days over the things that have been done. And I just want to take the time to reflect for a minute that 2 years ago, under your leadership and your teamwork and collaboration with all of your colleagues, you all made a recommendation to us for $1 billion bond package that was voted by 72% of this community and supported and is being implemented to create 21st century learning environments. Today, because of your leadership and your team's leadership and the collaboration and teamwork, we're about to double the minimum that the state requires for salary increases. And I think by the end of this fiscal year, which are, by the way, across the board and permanent, And by the end of this year, we'll be talking about school changes and about how we repurpose and we ensure that we're providing equity across our academic programs, no matter what part of this community you live in. And I think for me, I really appreciate the leadership of you and your team and of our colleagues here, because we're all rowing in the same way to making sure that the business that we're in, as one of our friends said a couple of days ago, the business we're in is transforming children's lives to make sure that they graduate high school, college, career, and life ready. And so I really just want to take the time to just reflect back and thank you for your leadership, because you're the one that we hire and hold accountable, but you have an entire team of individuals that you're recognizing for all of their hard work. And so I really appreciate your leadership in this as well as your teams. Great team. Thank you. So with that, Secretary Ellens, do you have a motion?
I do. I move that we approve agenda item 15.1 as recommended by the superintendent.
Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Matthias. Any discussion on the motion? So having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Matthias to approve agenda item 15.1. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes unanimously. So thank you. I'll reserve the copy of that.
Y'all shouldn't go anywhere because there'll probably be more questions on the next one. So just enjoy. Yeah, get comfy. If that was Trustee Cindy Anderson.
The second item under the superintendent's report is Austin ISD employee compensation plan for the 2019-2020 school year and revised policy DEC local. Dr. Cruz.
So thank you, President Rodriguez and board members, and thank you for that previous vote as well as a unanimous vote on our $1.5 billion budget. It seems it happens like in about just a couple of seconds, but it's a lot of work, and it's just going to continue. And certainly, Nicole, Fernando, George, our team is just, I think, phenomenal. The work that moves in the direction to realize better opportunities for our students. So when we look at compensation, just to highlight some of the key points around compensation, what this one includes, it's a 6% raise across the board for all staff. A 7% raise for teachers, counselors, librarians with more than 5 years experience. And so that's that category of employees that'll get the 7%. Increase in stipends for bilingual education and special education. Also addressing decompression. So that's one item that we had talked about before. So we did some last year, do some this year for next, and then look at it again for the upcoming school year, or for starting our budget for August for then the 2020-2021 school year. And it is, as President Rodriguez mentioned, that whereas we were, as our state requirement, around maybe $21 million, a little over $21 million, for us it's upwards of $50 million, right, $48 million investment in our people. So we're at a very different place than where we were when we were looking at barely a 1% across the board to where we are today. But I think it's important because it's our teachers and our school folks, our district leadership, they're the ones that are getting our outcomes for our students. And the students are the ones working hard every single day, doing their homework and doing their studies. But really, we are where we are because of our teachers and their great work, our campus leadership and district leadership. As we can tell, this is a large organization. And so, yes, our core mission is around educating students. But everybody's got to be all in. Everybody has to be all in on educating students. And that's certainly what you see represented in the work that we've done to this point, and there's obviously more still to do. So with that, we recommend the compensation plan to the board. That includes these two specific items around compensation and also the revised policy DEC local.
So Secretary Ellens, do you have a motion?
I move approval of item 15.2 as recommended by the superintendent.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion, trustees? Seeing no discussion, having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Letitia Anderson to approve agenda item 15.2. Oh, I'm sorry. No, Letitia Anderson. Yeah. To approve agenda item 15.2, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, the motion passes by all those on the dais. So the third item under the superintendent's report is revision of policy FNCA student dress code. Dr. Cruz?
Thank you, President Rodriguez and board members. I'm going to read just the purpose behind their change in our student dress code policy, and which I think is, some may say it came quick, but I think it was a long time coming, and I'm glad that it's here before our board. We had a discussion at our work session around this particular item, but now it's come forward, and we are something we want to implement. But I'm just going to highlight the purpose behind this policy and how it's changing. And then, obviously, then the board has much more local policy on how it will be enacted, and the specifics around dress code. But Austin ISD student dress code supports equitable educational access and is written in a manner that does not reinforce stereotypes. To ensure effective and equitable enforcement of this dress code, school staff shall enforce the dress code consistently and in a manner that does not reinforce or increase marginalization or oppression of any group on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, gender, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, national origin, disability, age, immigration status, or any other basis prohibited by law that adversely affects the student. And so with that, we put our new policy forward which we are ready to implement for this upcoming school year.
Secretary Ellens, do you have a motion?
I move that we approve agenda item 15.3 as recommended by the superintendent.
Second.
Trustee Wagner seconds. Is there any discussion? Trustee Wagner?
I just wanted to say that I'm very proud to be able to support this policy change this evening. I feel like we very effectively removed gendered and discriminatory and objectifying language from our policies. We've removed body shaming from our policies, and we've finally recognized that our female students are not distractions. So thank you to our staff and to our community who overwhelmingly supported this positive change towards safe, fair, and educational environments that affirm diversity and student agency within our schools. So, very proud moment to be able to support this.
Thank you. Trustees? Trustee Ellens?
I would also like to commend the district for working so quickly on this. I want to call out one of the things we talk about a lot is just really recognizing institutional isms of all kinds. And when people say you talk about it a lot, but you don't do anything, this is doing something. And I really want you to take credit for that work because it means something, and it means something every day to our students who are showing up and our teachers who are being held to the same standards. And so it's important work, and I really want to thank you for helping us really put some teeth around equity and making every child feel important when they walk in to school every day. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Ashe.
I also wanted to just take a moment and say that I'm excited for this moment. I also wanted to acknowledge through what I had seen. I had spoken when we first got the first draft of what was going to be the dress code, and I know that there have been some changes in it, and wanted to acknowledge the response that you had to the survey, to principal and administrator input, and wanted to make sure that you knew that I noticed that, and that I do appreciate your taking the time to do that. I do think it's going to be very interesting as we move forward to see it in practice, and if we do continue to see maybe a more consistent application of the dress code as we move forward. I know I have heard from several people that they felt like maybe this was too lax, which I thought was very interesting. And to that, I just wanted to say, if you've ever fought with a 15-year-old in the morning trying to get them to get dressed appropriately or in a way that is different than what they had in mind, you can only imagine what that fight must be like for a teacher or an administrator, and the power struggle that occurs and the lack of learning that occurs as a result of that. And so I wanted to acknowledge, in my opinion, that by changing this dress code from being punitive to a space that tells children what they should do instead of what they shouldn't do, it actually, as I have stated before, when you're a preschool teacher and you say, don't stand in the chair, and the kids kind of stare at you like a deer in headlights saying, well, what should I do then? It's always been proved much more effective to say, please put your feet on the floor. And so by giving our students what they should be doing, I feel like that is a much better developmental place to come from. I am appreciative of all of the work that went into this. I do think that there will be some questions that will still come from it. I think from the principals that I have spoken to in my area, there has been some concern, even still with the hoodies, as it pertains to safety and security. And I know it tells in the dress code that it needs to be behind the ears. I think the implementation of that is going to be a challenge. And I look forward to seeing how we move forward as a board and move forward as a district to ensure that our students are still safe and secure and doing the things that they need to be educated without a power struggle over what they're wearing. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I do want to acknowledge Dr. Goodnow and Tracy Spinner for their work and their leadership in this, getting feedback from our parents, from our administrators, from staff, and then shaping the policy that is just written in a much better way. So thank you so much for your work and your leadership on this.
Thank you. Trustees, any other questions? If not, having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Wagner to approve agenda item 15.3. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion passes unanimously by all those on the dais. The fourth item under the superintendent's report is an update on facilities and school construction. Dr. Cruz.
This might be a record. There's a third applause time in a row, so I'm sort of liking that, right? It sort of throws me off base a little bit. So now, Matthias and Bob, you're gonna have to get another applause moment too. I will do it if nobody does. It comes back to facilities, but it's really, really cool stuff. So when we hear, we wanted to go know what's going on in schools, and there's a lot of interest always in Austin, and it doesn't necessarily, when we say road trip to go see a school, that might be really, really good to still do a road trip, so anyway, that might still be something that we do. But I wanted to share with the board and with our community something I just think is just really wonderful and amazing, that Matthias and his team and Bob and we've got Zach Pierce working on this, all coming together just to demonstrate the actual work that's happening. It is still a large organization, and just because it's not happening in front of my face, it doesn't mean it's not happening. There's a lot of work going on, as some of our trustees even noticed as we took some tours of some sites just the other day, to look at the projects that are going on as far as our bond and implementation that President Rodriguez mentioned. That work still continues. And so you probably, as our groundbreakings or recognitions, you've seen a drone up and around, right? And Matthias and his smart mind has other ideas for that, on how we put together a compilation to share with the community the progress on the implementation of the bond. And I'll just, as a reminder, with many school districts, and I've worked in other districts, if you open one school a lot, that's a lot. If you open two schools, that's even more. But next year, for the some in the January of 2020, and then more the next year, in 1 year period, 7 new or fully modernized campuses. And it's 7. Right, exactly. Thank you, Celso and Jacob. Thank you. There you go. 7. That's sometimes we just it's a signing or something, but there's work that goes into that, and then on top of that, it's going to transform teaching and learning. But yeah, I gave you like 5-minute heads up on that one, didn't I? Right? It took us, but we're there. So I just wanted Matthias just to share with us the work that he's doing to let the community know on the progress on our different sites. So Matthias.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Cruz. Matthias Segura, Operations Officer. Beside me, I have Bob Servey, the Executive Director of Construction Management Department. So thank you for that introduction. I'm happy to share with you all a brief update where we are in the 2017 bond program. We are less than 200 days from opening our first schools, actually 170 days, so my heart is pounding. A lot of things are ongoing. To date, we've had 10 groundbreakings, 2 site dedications. We've implemented or in the process of implementing 49 targeted projects, which include the projects that directly impact Warm Safe Dry, right? These are the roofing projects, the mechanical system improvement projects. Some of these were done last year, and these will also be ongoing through this summer. We have over $450 million in projects ongoing right now under construction, which is a gargantuan effort when you think about that. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of space, a really, really great process we've been going through. And the list of things that we've been doing goes on and on and on. I think what I'm most proud of is that these projects are very thoughtful in how they're designed. We have made adjustments along the way to make sure that we're incorporating all the great things that support 21st century learning, but we also bring in the community, we bring in the principals, we bring in the teachers, we bring in a lot of different folks by way of the CATs, by engagement meetings to really tailor the design to the community. And you can see that in the projects that we have already underway. So just to orient everybody, I'm at the on the AISDfuture.com website. You can go to this website, and all the information regarding our projects is on this website. One of the things that Dr. Cruz was just alluding to or mentioned was our drone footage. As you maybe have participated in some of our groundbreakings, we do have a drone. We use it for various things, including roof inspections. It's a safer way to inspect roofs. But we also, through this process, instead of a traditional process, which would be just getting a still photo from a contractor or having a tower with a live feed, we decided to go and path kind of a route around the projects and then have the contractor send us every 2 weeks an updated image, an updated video. And so we compile all those together. We put together a little video that we send to all of our stakeholders. We post it on our website. We post it just about everywhere. And what I'm going to do is kind of share with you kind of what that looks like. There is a process that we have to go through to get these suitable for public consumption. There's an accessibility component to it. So what we typically do is take the information, we weave it together, and then we send it to our communications department to add the text to make sure it can be viewed on multiple different platforms as well as applications. And so you can see here the Norman project. One of the things I think is also very helpful is that we do have little indicators below the video. This is a longer video, so I'm going to skip through a couple pieces of it. But it tells you precisely when you'll see your project come up if you're interested in a particular project. For instance, here's Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders. A lot of tremendous work occurring at that site, and that groundbreaking was just 3 months ago or 2 months ago. Seems like so long, just a couple months ago. But again, a very useful tool to communicate to all of our stakeholders, the public, just all the great things that are happening, and the tremendous amount of effort that goes into just getting to break ground. And then once you break ground, you can really begin to see kind of all the really great things. Here we have Doss Elementary School. Again, we have kind of some information regarding the project, its capacity components, things like that. But it's a great tool, and it's proven to be very, very useful as we go through the process. So we have that for all of these. They're great. This is Southwest Elementary School down off of Scartman in the Avanya neighborhood. And you can see all the work that's going. Most people don't get to see what's happening when you drive by. So this is actually a really, really cool tool that can be used. It also does help us in planning as well, kind of make adjustments, making sure we're staying on top of things. It's a perspective that most project managers and leaders don't get to use, but we have that available to us. And so again, we are releasing these on a monthly basis. We will continue to send them out, and we'll look for opportunities to have y'all share with the community all the great things that we're doing. So with that, I will I guess pause and answer any questions of Dr. Cruz, unless you want me to take them through other components.
Maybe do another side, let it roll maybe for just a minute, just
Sure.
to get the orientation.
So let it roll for a little bit. Brown, if you'd like, Dr. Cruz.
Yeah, so, yeah, there you go. Let's look at just about a minute or two of T.A. Brown.
Sure.
And just as on a point of where we started with these projects, you just saw Menchaca, Go Valley, Eastside Memorial High School, brand new learning facility, also as an early college high school. Norman, Sanchez, where we started to talk about DOS. So just gives you a different perspective as to, if we ask the question, has Mr. Segura been a little bit busy? Well, now we know why, right? Yeah, the answer is yes. So a good way just to get an understanding of what's going on in our sites. So, and it's a big place. We can't get around to everywhere. But this the board members, you can see what's going on. Plus, you can also share this on your own social media sites as well. I know many of y'all go out to talk to parent groups or different organizations. It might be something else. It's one thing to talk about it, but it's another to show this is where we are right now in this process. And I just love the technology. To when we were at Blazier, I think President Olitigas and I were looking up there and say, what is that that's coming at us? And then I said, I don't know, let me go ask Matias. I know it's him. I think he's behind us. And sure enough, he was.
Somebody thought it was a big mosquito.
Yeah. Hovering around. So just wanted to share that with the board. I thought this was something that was really a pretty cool way of communicating what's going on at our different sites.
Okay.
Thank you very much. The last item on our agenda is our update on Lucy Reed. Dr. Cruz?
Yes. So I'm going to have Matias Segura, who's been working on this particular project, just have a quick update for the board on where we are with this. It's a little bit complex because it's certainly with the school district, but also working with city and city leadership. So with that, Matias.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Cruz. Matias Segura, Operations Officer for the Austin Independent School District. So one of the things that we're doing as part of the modernization projects is trying to identify unique opportunities to support our students and staff. And one of those opportunities was brought to us or introduced to us by Principal Dickey and some other partners. And so we thought about exploring a potential clinic partner. Again, we don't have a partner named. We haven't gone through a formal process to identify that partner, but we do believe that there is a intrinsic value in exploring this to the fullest extent possible. And so that requires us to actually move down a planning process. Right? We have to make sure that it's a good fit for the school district, it's a good fit for a potential partner, and most importantly, it's a good fit for our students. So as part of this process, we have to always be mindful of what we have to do on the city side. And there is a requirement within the city of Austin by way of the Land Use Development Code that if a clinic partner comes in and the square footage exceeds 5,000 square feet, we have to go through a zoning change. This is not uncommon. We're probably going to run into it again if we begin to explore future partnerships across the district. We'll have to think about what this looks like long term. But for in this instance, we did do some performance and due diligence and identified a typical space need for a potential partner, and it's between 15 and 20,000 square feet, which is about 15% of the total square footage of the site. And so we've been working closely with the City of Austin to determine what would be required to go through a zoning change. We have made it through the Zoning and Planning Commission on a 7-0-1 vote, and will be before City Council. One of the things that's come up, however, is that typically the way we would ensure that the zoning is appropriate and isn't not that it's in alignment with kind of the expectations of the city, we have to put some requirements around it, some kind of guardrails. And typically what we would use is a conditional overlay. Well, it's likely that the conditional overlay process and that component will actually go away in the next version of the Land Use Development Code. So in an effort to be almost like a boots and suspenders, a belt and suspenders type of solution, we're actually looking at proposing a public covenant, essentially a covenant that would say, City of Austin, if we move down this path and we rezone this portion of the site, or the site to support a clinic use, if at any point in the future the district sold the site, then we would revert back to its conditional or similar land use type. That's all that is being asked of us. We think it's a fair recommendation. Council members have been informed and are very supportive, but it does require us to move through the process. We've had multiple meetings with the Allendale community and have communicated kind of the process, what the expectation is, and we're slated to go in front of council this Thursday. There's no action being taken except approval of the zoning. The site development permit and all things downstream that would be required before we actually move in would be predicated on us actually going through this process. So essentially what we're saying is, let's get it rezoned so we can continue through the process, continue planning together. Once we know more about the potential partner, the solution, then we'll come back with an actual restricted covenants that we would actually be able to execute, and that would go before the board for approval or for signature. So I'll pause and answer any questions that you might have.
Trustees, any questions? Trustee Ashe, and then Trustee Teich.
So thank you for bringing this forward so that we all understand, because I know that the school, Rosedale, is a unique school in and of itself, even within the district. And so I was hoping you could kind of clarify. This was a question that I know that the neighborhood association had, and it has to do with the code change.
Mm-hmm.
I think their understanding, as well as my understanding, is it's, even though we are doing the code change, it is actually not for the full 10-acre site. Is that correct?
So the zoning change would be for the entire site. The way we mitigate that is by adding a conditional overlay or the restricted covenants to limit the amount of actual constructible square footage tied to that type of use. And the reason that's appropriate is because we do not know the orientation of any potential partnership, what that might look like. We kind of have to go through the process a little bit further to understand how these two uses would complement one another. We talk about leveraging similar types of space, figuring out ways to support teaching and maybe learning environments. We don't know what that's going to look like, so we can't delineate precisely where the limits of that component will be. So what's happening is we're going to rezone the entire site, but we're going to use the restricted covenants to limit the amount of improvement tied to that clinic.
And what is that limit?
Not to exceed 20,000 square feet.
On the entire 10-acre property?
Correct.
Okay. And if for some reason a partnership is not identified, or we're not able to contract with someone, and it's decided that that's not going to be used, what then would happen?
That's a good question. So, one of the things that I want to be very mindful of is, if we go down this path, I want to make sure we have flexibility. Certainly, I think it's appropriate that if we ever transact the site, again, we're putting $40 million to support Rosedale, so this is going to be a generational type project. But if there ever was a transaction, then we would be required to move back. I think the challenge that we have if we look at that type of solution is if we do have a partner and then all of a sudden the partner leaves after 10 years, and Rosedale expands, would that be the catalyst for a zoning change? Or would there be some time, afforded to us to find a new partner? So I think you begin to get into those different types of scenarios when you look at that type of solution, which is why we're advocating for something fairly simple, which is if we have, if there's a partnership and the clinic comes on board, then we would maintain that zoning and be in compliance until we actually transacted or moved away from the site entirely. But again, that would not exceed 20,000 square feet. And again, that number is slightly conservative because we don't know what the design is going to look like.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Trustee.
Trustee Tysh?
So today I received a draft of that restrictive covenant, and I've forwarded that to Terry, and I've forwarded you copies also. And so, trustees, that will be coming before you fairly soon, so that you can take a look at it. And I do very much appreciate city leadership on this, and they're working hard, and I appreciate the concerns of the Allendale Neighborhood Association. I think that we've allayed most of those concerns through this restrictive covenant, so I'm looking forward to this this process going forward, and we're getting this school and the possibility of this clinic is very exciting.
Trustees, any other comments? I know, Matias, thank you so much for the update and for the clarification about that it's Rosedale going in there, some of our most vulnerable students, so appreciate the update. Trustees, any other questions? If not, thank you very much. Yes?
Just one last comment is because we're going to run into this again, our goal is to work with the City of Austin through an updated interlocal agreement to just have a better framework for how to address these sorts of things, because they're going to come up as we begin to think about how we might leverage our resources better for all the public. So just something I want to share.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So trustees, do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Having a motion by trustee Tysh and a second by trustee Ellens to adjourn, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion passes unanimously by all those on the dais, and the meeting is adjourned at 11:12 p.m. Thank you.